Millions of people have lost weight with personalized plans from Noom. Like Evan, who can't stand salads and still lost 50 pounds.
Salads generally for most people are the easy button, right? For me, that wasn't an option. I never really was a salad guy. That's just not who I am. But Noom worked for me.
Get your personalized plan today at Noom.com. Real Noom user compensated to provide their story. In 4 weeks, the typical Noom user can expect to lose 1 to 2 pounds per week. Individual results may vary.
Good evening, Andy.
Good evening, Paul. How are we?
I'm very well, thank you, and welcome all to part 9 of I think we should call it our Football Book, Football Book Corner podcast. It's
Excellent.
quite a mouthful, but, you know,
It is.
it is what it is, isn't it? When you say, and we've had the situation with groups and pages, etc., and you just say book corner, then you get all different kinds of books. So when you then say it's Football Book Corner, then that makes it more, because it has grown out of Book Corner on the Curran View with the Idol of Hillsborough, Mr. Terry Curran. But when we do this podcast, it's our Football Book Corner. That's Andy from myfootballbooks.com and me. So we talk about football books. We have no idea where we're going to go, what we're going to talk about. But firstly, we always talk about how people can connect with you on Facebook and Twitter, your website, and your monthly newsletter that's got to be out shortly for October.
It is, yeah. Coming up on this weekend, isn't it? So it's amazing, isn't it? But no, thanks for the introduction. And it is our Football Book Corner. So all books are good, but especially football ones. I've built a website, myfootballbooks.com, which is, I believe it's the largest football book only dedicated website in the world. Pete.
Well done, mate.
Paul, I believe. I'm not aware of any others out there until someone tells me otherwise. So I've got over 10,000 followers now across all the social media platforms. We're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. And it's all at My Football Books on Twitter, same on Facebook. And and thanks for the mention, we also do a monthly newsletter every start of the month, which just basically, as per the website, what we do is promoting books, recommended books, also books that's coming up, new releases, ones that's coming out soon. And if I could also just mention as well, we also do bookmarks as well. So you could purchase a My Football bookmark for only $1.49 through the website. So I have to get that plug in then. So,
and all top drawer, fantastic quality that you've created. You created all your images on your own during lockdown. And let's give a mention to your mugs as well, because your mugs are fantastic. So whenever we're doing this, I usually have probably a couple of glasses of wine. Sometimes you might notice it as the podcast goes on a little bit later. But I've just got lemon squash tonight. My missus, she's banned me from drinking at home during the week. So I don't drink during the week. I just smash it the weekend.
There you go, mate. Remember cover.
And how's the moving gone? Because you did move house, didn't you? Is that all okay?
Yeah.
And have you got your bookshelf all sorted in your study?
Not quite. So that's why there's been a bit of delay between the last episode and this one. But moved all house, thankfully. The books, as you could probably imagine, I had, I think at the last count, if you picture these great big plastic containers, I think they're 84 litre, I think I had 8 of them, maybe more, full of books.
Wow.
And pretty much all of them are still in the plastic containers, ready to go on shelves. So bit by bit they're getting onto the shelves, but it takes a bit of negotiation with the wife, let's say, in terms of getting the room.
Now, is that the reason why you actually moved house, to accommodate all your football books? We've been speaking to her, so it probably is about that. So it's a growing collection, but there's always room for an extra one though on the shelf. Absolutely. So, what are you reading at the moment, and what are you promoting? what's on your list? How many books are you going to be talking about? Because what I've tended to do over the last few podcasts is nail down 10, maybe 12 books that have caught my eye, and largely through going onto your Twitter and Facebook feeds, I look at something and go, oh, I like that. Then I share it to the group, because we have got a group that's attached to the podcast, and also to, if it's a historic book, to one of my groups, which is looking at football memories of the 50s, 60s, 70s and 80s. And then always, if I like a book, I put it onto our group, The Current View, and we do talk about one or two of the books, and you do give us a recommendation every week for The Current View. And this week it was Jimmy Greaves, by people that know him, or knew him, shall we say, because it is just over a year since Jimmy passed, and Mike Donovan has written a fantastic book. So I think we should start there and celebrate the life of Sir Jimmy Greaves. That's what it should be called.
Yeah, great place to start as well. And Mike Donovan's a recognised author just in himself. I know he's done a number of books. That the one he did. He's done a number of. I think he did one really good one on Dave Mackay not too long ago.
Right, actually. Okay, yeah. Braveheart, wasn't it?
That's it. Yeah, football's Braveheart, and Jimmy Greaves is a great story to tell, isn't he? I think the subtitle to Mike Donovan's book on Jimmy Greaves is the authorised celebration of a national treasure, and I think that pretty much sums it up, doesn't it? When you think of Jimmy and his goal scoring talent, and which kind of get forgotten about if you ever turn on Sky Sport and talk about football starting in 1992 pretty much, and seem to forget about some of the greats, and arguably Jimmy's right up there, if not at the top, when it comes to goal scoring records.
Absolutely. And I've noticed another wonderful book while we're talking about great goal scorers. I have it in front of me. It's a lovely colour. I love I love these books that not all books are the same, but you know the books that Stephen Scragg, the trilogy.
Oh yes.
You know the way that the book's bound in the great cover that they have, and it looks like it's almost like a work of art book.
It is,
isn't it? And it's called 50 Greatest Goal Scorers in the History of British Football by Neil Beacom. And on the front there's Harry Kane, Ian Rush, Jimmy Greaves, Dennis Law and Alan Shearer. And it profiles 50 of the greatest goal scorers, including Steve Bloomer, Dixie Dean, Jimmy Greaves, Dennis Law, Ian Rush, Alan Shearer and Harry Kane, goal scorers from 3 centuries of football, right through to the Premier League era.
Fabulous.
But I didn't think we'd been playing for 300 years, so I don't quite see how it's from 3 centuries of football, but certainly many decades of football, because you're absolutely right. Football wasn't invented in 1992. The first Football League was in 1881, and the 8th of September was the first group of fixtures that come out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you mentioned Steve Bloomer there, didn't you? So that's a name going back to the very early days, over 100 years ago now, isn't it? He's quite famous for his Derby days as well, wasn't he? There's still a statue of him actually at Pride Park at Derby. Yeah, he actually played baseball for Derby as well, did Steve Bloomer? Yes. Mm-hmm. So I seem to recall that. So I remember reading his book. There was a biography done on him called Destroying Angel. Absolutely. Off the top of my head. Yeah. So great. There's great stories, isn't there, down the years? Some great goal scorers, and some that you just completely forget about, including the one which relates to one of my suggestions, if I'll probably start off with, is Brian Clough. We always think of his managerial talents, don't we? Yep. But not necessarily sometimes how good he was as a footballer before he took on the role of this book that I've been reading at the moment called I'm not sure how to pronounce this, I must admit. I'll probably get it completely wrong. Alchemy, which is about Brian Clough and Peter Taylor at Hartlepool United, and it is purposely with the S because it was known as Hartlepool at that time. And it's just come out through the great publishers called the History Press. And I've been reading that. So, but yeah, Cloughie's another one of those goal scorers, isn't he? I'm sure he's included in that. In those 50, and obviously sadly had to retire at the age of 29 when he had a terrible injury playing for Sunderland. But this book itself is brilliant. When he started at Hartlepool, he was just age 30, and he was joined by Peter Taylor, who I think was manager at the time at just down the road at Burton Albion. And again, there's a great synergies there as well about these stories. Because Burton Albion, Brian's son Nigel Clough was manager there as well for some time. And it's a really great read. Also remind you as well, there's a 16-year-old called John McGovern that played underneath Clough and Taylor at Hartlepool, and he followed Cloughie everywhere to then Derby, Leeds, and of course Forest becoming a European Cup champion as well. So it's a great read.
Yeah, won it twice with your team, Nottingham Forest. I also have this book in front of me.
Okay.
Was there two teams, Hartlepool and Hartlepool's United, and they merged together, or did they drop the S?
Yeah, there's two that they dropped the S because I think they'd merged. I think it was two towns. I did read it somewhere, and I was just trying to remember. I think it might have been the Hartlepool town or West Hartlepool.
Yeah,
I think they merged together. Yeah, so you'd be able to find it somewhere. But yeah, and then they dropped the S.
Christopher Hull has written the book.
Yeah.
The History Press have kindly sent me a book. I have spoken to Christopher.
Good.
Very, very, very intelligent man. He's a lecturer as well, isn't he? Very intelligent.
Is he?
Man.
Right. Yeah.
From London, and he's a Hartlepool United fan who's written a book. Yeah, so I had a good old chat with him. We haven't done the podcast yet. We're going to be doing it when he's less busy because he's really rushed off his feet. It's a busy time for him in education at the moment. This really was a labour of love. And I did say, what does alchemy mean? It's a great title. It's a great cover. And it's like embossed, isn't it, in gold writing, alchemy? Yeah. But, I mean, it's a great word, isn't it, and a great title for a book. You almost look at it and think, wow, that's different.
It is, yeah. I did research it, because I didn't know what it meant. And if you look at the dictionary, it's saying the dictionary is a seemingly magical process of transformation. So I think that's kind of linking it into Brian Clough, and obviously where he started from, and then, the magical process of where he went in his management career. So, yeah, that's what it means. But I did have to check it because it does great sense. But like you said, the way it's written, the front cover, and it has it in gold letters, just really makes it stand out, doesn't it?
Doesn't it?
Really impressive.
And it's great that there's a book about Brian's early days in management. And you did reference John McGovern. I was under the impression that Cloughie and Taylor discovered McGovern, but they didn't. It was already there. They certainly gave him his stripes, but they didn't discover and scout him up. But I have done recently a podcast with John McGovern in our Legends of the 70s series. So if you go on to or any of your general outputs of where you buy or where you reference and listen to the podcast, whether it be Acast, Spotify, or just Google search SRBmedia, or become a Patreon, and then you get everything in one place. All the w's.patreon.com/SRBmedia would make it very easy to find everything, but they all are out there on a cloud somewhere. So that's the beauty of modern technology. It's something I don't understand, but thankfully Chris does. But I do understand that this is a fantastic book, and it's brilliant that we've known so much about his Forest time. We've known so much about his Derby time, not so much about his Brighton days, and we didn't know very much about his Hartlepool's days until Christopher had written the book, and we will be doing a podcast together very shortly. So watch this space, guys.
Yeah, brilliant. There's great stories. I remember reading the book. I've not quite finished it yet, but there's bits about Clough went in order to generate funds for the club. He visited every pub in town. Yeah. It sounds just a great little story. So and classic Cloughie, even at that age, at 30.
Was that for a tot or to try and get people into the ground? What was the reason of visiting the pub? Bit of both.
It's a combination, probably that, yeah. Well, probably the latter as well, and if it while I'm here.
Because again, the beauty of this book, it's like Browne Clough was given the job as Hartlepool's manager. I mean, nobody knew whether in them days Cloughie was going to sink or swim. He'd just come off the back of a bad injury that cut his career short. He then went and I think he'd done a bit of coaching, didn't he, for Sunderland's youth team, because that's where he gets the connection with John O'Hare, and then got offered this job. So Clough got, I think he got one child, hadn't he, and I think possibly Nigel was on the way. He didn't know what he was going to do, where he was going to go. So for the first time in Cloughie's life, he probably didn't know what was going to happen next, but what did happen next was literally history in the making. And I think it's great that a book like that can tell the first steps of his managerial and mercurial rise.
Well, it's the fact that there's great pictures in there. The one I'm looking at it now, he's repairing and painting one of the stands at Hartlepool. So, you just couldn't picture Pep Guardiola or Jose Mourinho or anyone like that. I can't imagine they probably did that at the start of their career.
But then again,
different time again.
But again, that's the beauty in the age of innocence of football. That a manager had to do more than manage the football club. I mean, these days the managers, they want a manager, or somebody that goes and does the scouting, having a scouting network. Then they'll have somebody between the manager and the chairman and a director of football role. They have various different roles for medical science, and they even employ people to have, monitor the sleep of football players these days. Yeah. Cloughie had to do everything.
And they have even referee, coaches for each part of the area of the pitch. Like you got a defending coach, you got a midfield coach. It's just incredible.
Yeah, how football has changed, and I always say not for the better for me. Many would argue otherwise, but not for me. Give me the old days, those halcyon days of the golden age of football, and the great book there that covers Browne Clough's first steps in management. A book I noticed, Denied Promotion by a Tree, the Book of Amazing Football Facts by Les Scott. I have promoted, I'll say promoted, I've shared it on my socials and I've put it into the group and into the Current View group as well. It's a book that all of a sudden it just come up on my timeline, I guess. Yeah. Have you noticed these days on Facebook, since Meta or whoever they are have bought it, there's so many more promoted sites and pages that just turn up, and I think that's how I come across this one. I've gone, that looks interesting. How the hell can you be denied promotion by a tree? And I look at it and I think, I'm going to have a word with Les, and I'm certainly going to buy that book, because I do like a book of amazing football facts. I love football facts.
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. That's lovely. I love those different kind of stories as well. But obviously, again, you wouldn't have heard of, would you?
No, you wouldn't.
Put it pen to paper.
Yeah, a football fact that I come across years ago, and I actually don't know if it is true or false, but England played Germany. We drew 3-3 at Wembley this week. And Germany wore, or their away kit, their second kit, if you like, is green, isn't it? And apparently they adopted the green because the Republic of Ireland were the only team that would play against Germany after the Second World War. So out of a mark of respect for the Irish, West Germany, as it was back then, adopted their colours as their second strip.
Wow.
Now, if it ain't true, it's a great story.
It's a belter, isn't it?
Yeah, it is,
Yeah, I love that story. So you don't know why our promotion was denied by a tree as of yet, then?
No, I
so I've not seen that, but I'll have to dig that out.
Yeah.
I think that's one that's come out. I have seen it. So I think it might come out this month actually. So it rings a bell. So I'll have to pick that one out as well and find out the story behind that particular one.
Yeah, Les Scott.
Yeah.
I'll message Les and see if he fancies doing a podcast, and we can get the reason why it was denied by a tree. I mean, I'm guessing, promotion back in 1977 for Bolton Wanderers was denied by a Wolverhampton Wanderers goal scored by Kenny Hibbett, and I've had the pleasure of making a Game of My Life podcast with Kenny, and it was that infamous free kick with Willie Carr when Kenny's run over the ball, he's touched it, Willie's feigned there to hit the ball, and then he's chipped it over the wall and Kenny's dug it in. So I do know that promotion on many times has been denied by a kick of a ball, but not by not by a tree.
That's brilliant. It's a great title for a book, isn't it? Yeah, I think I've said this before. There's lots of books out there, and I think if you can get the feel of a book right, as you've mentioned, the Alchemy book, Brian Clough, you can get the book, the look feels right. It looks good, but if you can get a good title as well, something that catches your imagination, kind of thing, then you're onto a winner. And obviously, a good story as well in between does help.
Absolutely. I did mention Stephen Scragg's trilogy earlier, and the book I am actually reading the book. I haven't finished the 70s, Grandad. What was football like in the 70s yet? But I am gonna. But I'm doing a podcast with Dennis Mortimer. I've done several podcasts previously with Dennis, but his new book, his autobiography, is out now. The Full Morty, written with Richard Sydenham and forward by Browne Robson. Now, it is a fantastic read, but not only is it a fantastic read, it's a fantastic cover, and the title is one of my favourite titles, The Full Morty. What a title.
Yeah, great combination there. Yeah, obviously that's come out through Pitch, which is arguably right up there, isn't it, in terms of publishers, and they do have that kind of the gift of pulling together great titles and making the front cover really stand out. I've got that in front of me as well. It's fantastic, isn't it? So what a great title that is, The Full Morty. Well, it's brilliant.
I was listening to Dennis. He was on local radio last night with a pal of mine, Daz Alley. I used to go in and do stuff with Daz on a Thursday night. Now I'm sitting talking to you on my bed on a Thursday night about football books. But I'm sure Dennis said originally Richard had got the working title of Dennis Mortimer, the King of the Holt End, or it was something, something like that. And Dennis wasn't very happy with that title.
Right, okay.
I mean, he wasn't unhappy, but he just felt that he wasn't an Andy Gray, he wasn't a Brian Little, he wasn't an Andy Lockhead, he wasn't a king of the Holt End like those fellas were. And he was telling Andy Blair, it was probably at one of the meetings at the Wollaston Bar, the Britannia Sports Bar that I've attended many of them recently, that celebrated Aston Villa's European Cup glory days and the first league title in 71 years. And he was talking to Andy Blair and he was telling him about it. And Andy said, I got the title for you, The Full Morty. And he said, excellent. That's genius. So the title of the book come from Andy Blair, who Ron had brought in, not really to replace Dennis, but a similar kind of player to Dennis in those days after they'd won the Football League Championship. While we're on the Villa subject, I'm just going to briefly talk to our author of the week, Mr. Colin Abbott.
SRBMedia. Mr. Colin Abbott, welcome to our Football Book podcast, mate. Author of the week, no less than.
Thank you very much.
And when I say author of the week, of course, I mean author of the month. But Andy has moved, and it's been a couple of months since we've done the last hour, and it is now our Football Book podcast.
Yeah.
It's rather a mouthful, but I did want to get you on as author of the month because I'm a big fan of yours. When we first hooked up, it was over your Aston Villa, the first 150 years with John Farrelly and John Russell. Absolute coffee table, magnificent book. We're not going to talk about that because we have done a podcast already about that. We will again reconvene in, I think it's 2024, isn't it? When the second part
Paul.
of that comes out. You've done another wonderful, the big Aston Villa book of the 70s, again with Legends Publishing, David Lane, an absolute legend. And the latest book that you're working on is a very similar book. It's the big Aston Villa book, but it's not the 70s, it's the 80s. We've just referenced Dennis Mortimer's book, The Full Morty, which Dennis has done the foreword of your book. So let's just talk about, firstly, the 80s, because it was a great decade for Villa, or the first part of it was a great decade for Villa, and then we'll talk about your Barton's Army book as well, sir.
No problem at all, Paul.
So you fire away. How long's it taken? I mean, I know you, and your research is second to none, and it is a labour of love. So how long has it taken you? And when did you start doing this concept? Because you've had it on the back burner for some time, haven't you?
We have. We had to keep shelving it to go on to other projects, unfortunately.
Yes. Yeah.
When the 70s come out, we had a book launch at Villa Park in November 16. But as soon as Dave formatted the book and it was sort of signed off and went to the printers, I actually started on the 80s book back then.
Yeah.
And I started doing match reports because, bearing in mind, there's about 500 to do over the course of a season. I started in earnest once the 70s went to print. So I probably started that about September, October 16, and it's finally there. It's 6 years down the line. But I've got to say, we put that one on the back burner twice. Once to do the one that you mentioned, the 150 years. And then once that had been completed, we came back to the 80s book. But then what with all the hype of the celebrations for the 40th anniversary of the lads winning the European Cup, I wanted to do something, and Dave Lane come up with this fantastic concept. So we got Barton's Army out the way, and then we restarted for the third time with the 80s, and it has only just this week been, as I would say, signed off. It's remaining open till Sunday for fans to get the names in, and then first thing Monday or Tuesday, it's off to be printed, and that's the latest project, and it's reached completion, and it's I was pleased with the 70s one, but this one, it knocked spots off it simply because of what we achieved.
Yeah.
We started the season with a bang, winning the title. We'd been threatening in 76 to 7. I actually think, and I've spoken to Dennis Mortimer about this. I actually thought we were going to win the treble, you know.
Yeah, Dennis was thinking along those same lines, and he was quite. I'm reading Dennis's book at the moment. He was quite disappointed when Villa didn't win the treble because they could have, and they were a gnat's whisker, wasn't they, away from it?
Yeah, well, when you consider I think it was 14 cup matches that season. That's a third. That's a third of what the league was back in the day when it was 42 games.
Yes,
we had. Every time the Villa turned up at the baseball ground, you could guarantee there was injuries. Chris Nichol was injured. Andy Gray was injured. Frank Carradus was injured. Chris Nichol only played in the cup final because they strapped his foot up that tight. He said it was like when he hit that ball from 35 yards out, he said it was like hitting it with an iron, playing golf. That ball was going nowhere other than in the net.
Yeah.
And those injuries cost us I think we finished 6 points behind Liverpool that season when we finished fourth.
Yeah, you did.
There wasn't a lot in it, and you think of the games that we could have won, but that was I suppose that was like a prelude to what was on the horizon. Saunders was tweaking here and there. You know, it's everybody goes on about the final piece of the jigsaw. Don't mention the other 10 pieces of the jigsaw prior, but I can see his analogy in that. And the players all said that from the Leeds game onwards. I was at a gig in the week there. Jimmy Rimmer, he said he knew it was on the boil. Dennis knew that they were going to do it from the very first league game at Leeds. So this 80s book, to start the decade, I should say, with winning the title. And when you think about it, 89 to 90, we were so close to winning that again.
Yeah.
So there was a downside through the middle of the decade. We never got close really to what we achieved in that first year. The second season, we finished 11th. That was pretty rough. Bearing in mind Ipswich Town, who they pushed us all the way in 80 to 81. They actually finished runners up in 81 to 2.
Yeah, they did it twice, didn't they? Yeah.
That's consistency.
Yeah.
But like I say, we fell away to 11th, but I defy any team to say that they wouldn't finish 11th if they got the European Cup in their hands. It was a no-brainer, wasn't it?
Absolutely, and an unbelievable situation happened in February that year when Ron Saunders resigned, walked out, then went to Birmingham City. Tony Barton took over. Villa were 15th at the time and did end up 11th, so there was a little bit of progression. Tony didn't really tinker much with the team. He had that many great professionals that done it for him, didn't he?
Paul.
Absolutely.
Tony didn't need to, because with doing this book and doing the Barton's Army book, I was really fortunate to get close to Tony Barton's family, be it Chris and Gary, his sons, or Tony's widow, Rosina.
Yeah.
And where everybody assumed, I certainly assumed, that Tony Barton was Ron Saunders' assistant manager.
Yeah, chief scout, wasn't
he? He came in as a scout, but his actual title, believe it or not, was manager's assistant.
Oh, yeah.
And I'll tell you what, assistant manager and manager's assistant, it's like the difference between night and day.
Right, okay.
But you said Tony didn't tinker with anything. Tony didn't need to. He knew exactly what he had there because, and again, I only found out through the research, from Ron Saunders coming in at Villa Park, Keith Leonard got injured early 75 as it happens, in an injury against Jimmy Rimmer.
Yeah.
The Villa needed to replace Keith Leonard. They needed a forward. Tony Barton, who was at Portsmouth at the time, had earmarked a young Scottish lad no one had heard of called Andy Gray.
Yeah.
He was in the employ of Portsmouth. Portsmouth didn't want him because he wasn't a name to put bums on seats. Tony got in touch with Ron Saunders, who they'd played together at Fratton Park. Ron was sold on the idea, got Andy Gray in, and as a result of that, he offered Tony the job of chief scout.
Yeah.
Tony relocated with his family up to Birmingham from Portsmouth. His first signing was the first person Tony actually recommended to Ron was Dennis Mortimer, believe it or not.
Right.
And every single player, and I have this on good authority, I actually spoke to Tony's personal assistant, Tony Barton's personal assistant, just to get clarity on it. But every single player that came in, from Dennis Mortimer all the way through to when Tony Barton was actually sacked, the only player that came through the door where Tony had nothing to do with it was actually David Geddes.
Yeah.
You think of all the other players that came in, you got your Kenny Swains and your Des Bremners and your Peter Withs and your Tony Morleys, Ken McNaught, Tony Barton. Tony Barton was with the eyes that found those. It's incredible.
Yeah, you're absolutely spot on, because I've been to quite a few of the events commemorating Villa's successes of winning both the league and then the European Cup. And to a man, every player has sung the praises of Tony Barton. And when Andy Blair has said, well, how did you come to Villa Park? It's, well, Tony Barton. How did you? Tony Barton. Tony Barton was so instrumental in the development, because behind that manager needs a team, and Saunders got a great team. And when you look at the 80s team that went on and won the League and the European Cup, that 70s team, he built that in the image of the 70s team, didn't he? Where you could look at Gray and Little, and then you could look at Shaw and With. Either one could play with the other. You know, for instance, Peter With could have played with Brian Little, and Peter was brought in really to play with Brian. Right. He had that problem as well with injuries, didn't he? So what he done was quite remarkable.
Andy Gray, he was, you know, I know he wasn't he wasn't in the same physique and the same mould as Peter With, but Andy put himself about, and I think he was 5'10", but bloody hell, he could jump.
Yeah, he could.
He could jump. The goals he scored with his head were no one's business. And Brian fed off him. You had John Dean, that was prolific at scoring. They moved on, and then Peter With was the target man, much as Andy Lockhead had been back in the 70s. And then you had a young Gary Shaw feeding off Peter. Yeah. So it was a progression. And had Alex Cropley not got injured, Alex Cropley would have carried on to be in the team that won the title. Yeah, he got injured. Des Bremner was his replacement, a very, very similar middle of the park player. And Des Bremner, he never really got the credit or the plaudits that the bloke deserved. He was never going to be a match winner. He wasn't blonde haired, and you know, he wasn't like a Gary Shaw pin-up type thing, where Gary would get 10 out of 10 some weeks, and he might go down a bit. Whereas with Des Bremner, he was a constant. He'd have been a number 8 out of 10 every game of the season. Never put a foot wrong. Never sort of caught the eye, but he did a job. You know.
Absolutely. He was a steady Eddie. He was Mr. Consistency, Mr. Reliability.
Exactly.
And as you say, I mean, another player that they got from Scotland, there was a big Scottish contingent during the 70s and the 80s, wasn't there? And Andy, I remember doing an interview with Andy, a podcast with Andy, and he said Ron hadn't seen me play football. Andy didn't even know where Aston Villa was. But
no, that's right.
He come down there, and I think the first taste of Aston Villa and Villa Park was when Villa put Birmingham City to the sword, and Brian scored the winning goal, wasn't he? He was there on the bench and thought, blimey.
Andy was in the dugout, like you said. Yeah. He wanted a piece of it.
Exactly, yeah. And he's like, blimey, I mean, this is a big club. Yeah. I think at Dundee United, where he previously played, I think they used to get probably 12, 15, 18,000 maximum. This was a different ball game for Andy Gray.
Of course it was. What I would say in Ron's defence, you know, and you know, I'm waxing lyrical about Tony Barton for bringing all these players in.
Yeah.
But what you got to think of when Tony went up to Dunfermline and watched Alan Evans, Alan was a forward.
Yeah, he was.
And when Kenny Swain came down to Villa Park, Kenny was a forward. Yeah, he was like a right-sided, like your old outside right.
Yeah.
Your number 7. And then Gary Williams, he started off as a centre-half initially. And then he found these places and he changed them around. He took Alan Evans from a centre-forward role, stuck him alongside a fellow Scot, Ken McNaught, and wow. One of the best half-back pairings you would see until Paul McGrath come on the scene.
But again,
you know, further down the line, and then Kenny Swain. You know, Kenny was an attacking fullback, and Kenny told me once that Ron Saunders had said to him, "I want you to defend on their 18-yard line," and that just speaks volumes.
Yeah.
He did not want his side defending deep. He wanted them to be on the offensive all the time.
Absolutely.
And that was the mark of Saunders.
Absolutely. But when you'd identified the central defensive partnership there, the team before it, you'd got an overlapping right full back in John Gidman, hadn't you?
Well, that's right. Kenny Swain basically took the place of Gidman.
Exactly, yeah. And then you look at Chris Nicholl, and McNaught took the place of Nicholl. Alan Evans took the place of Leighton Phillips. You know,
that's right.
All of these players, he identified the players to replace and brought them in and the transition was almost seamless, wasn't it?
Yeah,
and let's not forget in the 70s, Dixie Dean, because Dixie was a great forward who
was
scored a lot
phenomenal.
of goals, didn't he, in that one season?
That's right. That's right. He was very unfortunate, Dixie, because he was sort of pushed out to West Bromwich Albion.
Yeah.
But Saunders, he swapped players like for like. I never thought John Gidman would be replaced, but he was. Yeah. And I've actually read Dennis's book, The Full Morty. Absolutely, it's a riveting read. I actually thought, through my conversations with Dennis, he's put the forward down for this 80s book. He's been one of 7 players interviewed for this 80s book. When I say interviewed, there's like a 4 or 5 page spread on 7 players.
Yeah.
Dennis was gracious enough to be one of those. And when he talks, you listen, and everything he says just makes sense. And he gives you such a beautiful, wonderful insight into the workings of that team that was so achieving,
You can certainly see why Dennis was the captain, because he's a great talker, a great inspiration, a great leader.
Absolutely brilliant bloke. Even, I'll stand and talk and talk to him, and that you're in the presence of someone special. You just do.
Absolutely.
You can't not be.
Who was the other players that you interviewed for your Aston Villa? It's called the Big Aston Villa Book of the 80s. So it just sits alongside the 70s book, doesn't it? Yeah.
That's right. Well, we've been really, really fortunate with the people that we've got on board. Gary Thompson, bearing in mind these interviews took place probably 2 years ago. Gary Thompson, who, wow, I remember watching him in that 87 to 88 season when Graham Taylor got us up.
Yeah.
And the Villa fans used to sing Bruno. He was built like the proverbial.
Again, come from Coventry, didn't he?
Yeah, he was absolutely phenomenal. Well, he did play for Coventry. He came to us from Sheffield Wednesday.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, he was playing for Sheffield Wednesday the year we got relegated. His boss was Howard Wilkinson.
Got ya.
And as he come off the pitch, Ron Wiley, another Villa legend, had said to Tomo, would you like to come to Villa Park? And Gary said, I'd walk there to come to Villa.
Yeah.
Howard Wilkinson saw him talking to the enemy and he cussed him. But Gary Thompson, he gave us a really, really lovely in-depth interview. And yet, you've got to remember, he was in the process, like Dennis, of doing his own book. It's Don't Believe a Word. I've got a copy of that. I haven't had time to go through it as in-depth as I want to because I've got my own stuff going on. But Gary says it, he tells it exactly as it is, warts and all. And he was a phenomenal player. Nobody can forget those 2 goals he scored at Birmingham City when we beat them 2-1 on the way to coming up with Taylor. He scored a lot of goals for us that year, Gary Thompson. He was one of them. Dennis Mortimer was another one of the 7 as mentioned. I got Nigel Spink involved. He tells a lovely story. I wasn't aware that he played for West Ham as a kid, and he let a chunk of goals in. It was either Martin Chivers or Jimmy. I think it was Martin Chivers scored 4 past him, and he was called into the West Ham office, and the hierarchy there with John Lyle and Ron Greenwood, and he basically told him not to give him his job on the building site. And yet, look what he aspired to. He's done something that West Ham have never done. They haven't won the European Cup. So Nigel was one. Kevin Gage, he started off at Wimbledon. Kevin, fantastic player for us. He started as a right back, then he was a probing midfield player. He weighed in with goals. Proper no nonsense. Well, never mind no nonsense. I think Gagey was a bit of a flair player. I remember him scoring a couple when Norwich City were actually top of the table. We beat Norwich 3-1. Yeah. And Kevin Gage scored 2 of the goals, and he was on fire that season. Very, very reliable player. We have Mark Burke. Mark didn't make a great deal of appearances for us, but he did a job for us when he was called upon. Unfortunately, he followed. There was like an exodus from Villa Park that went to Ayresome Park, Middlesbrough.
Yeah.
Bruce Rioch was the manager up there. They got the likes of the goalkeeper, Kevin Poole. They got Paul Kerr. Mark Burke went up there. There's a few more went up. I can't remember offhand who they were. But Mark's another one that was interviewed. And, you know, he might not have played as many games or was as prominent as the lads we've mentioned, but he still played a role. Then we have Andy Gray, the lad that came from Crystal Palace, not the Scottish one.
Yeah.
Andy was a fantastic player. I saw him get sent off in a couple of games, but he wore his heart on his sleeve, Andy. And I've been talking to him recently, funny enough. Back in the day when I lived in the Northeast, there were some games I just could not get tickets for, one being Luton away, you know, and it was members only.
Yeah.
And Andy Gray I caught him the one day up at Middlesbrough, coming out the ground at Middlesbrough after a 3-3 draw. And I was asking a few players if he could help us get a ticket for Luton. And Andy said, yeah, I'll get you one. And I said, you're not pulling me chain because it's a long way to go down to Luton from the northeast. And he said, no, I'll have a ticket. And he did. And he helped us get tickets for that famous Crewe Alexander game when we were trailing 2-0 at half time. I was in the seats for that through tickets that Andy got me. Yeah. I was ending up sitting next to this young girl who turned out to be David Platt's future wife.
Right.
At half time, I went round the back of that stand just to stretch my legs, and I actually listened. I could hear through this glass. I could hear Graham Taylor reading the players the riot act, and I didn't actually think Graham Taylor swore till then, and sort of wow. So, yeah. And then the last player that we've got for this book, and I don't know how to this day how I managed to get him to agree, but I actually interviewed David Platt
probably his bird.
quite a few hours. Well, funny enough, I told him the story when I was interviewing him last year on the phone. I told him this story about how I'd been sat next to this girl, Rachel, and she said to me, she says, "Oh, how's David Platt doing?" I said, "Oh, he's playing brilliant." I said, he scored 4 goals against Ipswich in a cup match a few weeks ago. And she says, "Yes, I've got the match ball." And I turned to my mate, and there was a few expletives among it, but I'd basically said I wouldn't be giving my girlfriend the match ball. And after that, she didn't speak to me. And I reminded David of that. He says, when he gets off the phone, he's going to go and mention this to her. But David, the superstar that he was, the story that he tells me, it was quite surreal, actually, because he's telling me how he'd come down to Villa from Crewe Alexander. He'd gladly left Old Trafford because he wasn't getting first team time. He comes to Villa, finds himself in the reserves. He's not even training with the first team, and he's going back to a hotel. He's sitting there watching 4 walls, thinking, "I've made a mistake here. I've taken a backward turn because I am no longer a first team player." And you think, he's telling you this, and then you straight away you think of David Platt. You think of that wonderful goal he scored against Belgium.
Oh, yes.
And then this same lad's telling you how he thought he made a mistake because he'd come to Aston Villa. And it's like, wow.
It is crazy, isn't it? The way that the players have had times in the career where they just thought, wow, what am I doing? But then, the way that they progress and their path, if you like, opens up for them, and they just turn into this magnificent player.
Yeah.
And what a player he was at Villa Park, wasn't he, Plato?
Well, I was talking to him on the phone, and I did say the name Gordon Cowans came up, and David Platt said, honestly, he absolutely loves Sid.
Yeah. And
it's the first time I've ever given a player's number over without asking their permission. But after I got off the phone to David, David was aware that Sid's got a few problems where his memory's concerned. Mm-hmm. And I phoned Sid and I said, I've just been having a wonderful conversation with Platty. Here's his number. Give him a ring, Sid. And he did.
Right.
And that would have helped him enormously. And the love that they have for each other, without that sounding weird, David would say he mentioned in one, it's mentioned in the book, so I don't want to go too deep, but when we were playing Inter Milan at home, David scored the second goal. Kent Nielsen scored an absolute thunderbolt. The second one, David Platt, as soon as the ball was pushed to Cascarino, Platt made his run. He said, I knew Cascarino wouldn't find me. He says, but I knew Cascarino would just push the ball short to Sid Cowans. Yeah. And he says, it doesn't matter where I'm at. He says, Sid will find me, whether it's with his left foot or his right foot. He will put that ball exactly where he knows I need it. And lo and behold, he does. Sid's, both of Sid's feet, you know, it was like a wand what he could do with that ball.
Absolutely.
Absolute. And him, Sid and Platt, you know, they must be two of the closest players to being classed as world class that I've had the fortune to watch at the Villa. The only player I would actually put above those in my 50 years watching them will be Paul McGrath.
Yeah.
He was just, I can't even put words in that. He was just out of this world, Paul McGrath.
Absolutely.
And when I say world class, Paul, what I mean is I think Paul McGrath would have walked into any club side in the world at that time on his form.
Absolutely. I remember talking to Big Ron, and when they used to play Manchester United, used to play against Liverpool, Rushy never scored against Man United. And Paul McGrath, in his unassuming manner, used to say, thank you very much, Mr. Rush. Thank you very much, Mr. Rush. And again, you really used to piss and Rush off, that did. Yeah. But that was Paul McGrath. What a player.
Yeah.
I can see a 90s book on the horizon. But we must talk finally about Barton's Army. Different because the 80s, 70s and the 80s, match reports talking to players, it's got everything about Aston Villa of the 70s and the 80s. Barton's Army is pretty much an account of the supporters, isn't it? I was just looking through.
Totally different concept, Paul.
Yeah, Richard Sydenham is in here, I noticed, and Terry Whelan's in there. So a few of my Facebook friends are in there. There's some wonderful pictures of Villa supporters lying down in a state of, worse for wear, shall we say. But there's some big accounts, and some of them, Keith Foreman here, I'm looking here on page 212, probably just a couple of paragraphs. So you've had so many, and some have got a lot to say, and some haven't got quite a lot to say, but all of them in this wonderful book, and great accounts of their memories of...
They're so diverse, every one of them. I'll be honest with you, it was Dave Lane's idea, this. Yeah. He knew I went to the final. He knew I spent a whole year at Agricultural College living on a farm management course, and I took the time off at the very end to go to Rotterdam to watch the Villa in that final, and I wasn't allowed to sit my exams that I missed through going to Rotterdam.
Blimey.
And the principal there, he really wasn't impressed, but he wasn't a football fan. He liked horses. And I actually said to him as I came out the office, he sort of berated me like a child. And I said, it's not my fault. I said, you're only interested in things that eat hay and fart. And it didn't go down very well. But I never went back anyway, so it didn't make a great deal of difference.
I love the colour. Sorry to butt in there, but I love the cover. It's a play on Dad's Army, isn't it? Yeah. Barton's Army. It's fantastic.
Well, I can't take the credit for that. It was David Lane's. It was David Lane's idea.
Yeah, brilliant.
The cover was his idea. All I did, I put my words in my journey through all the. Even though I only went to the final, I was telling my story of what I was doing and where I was at through all the rounds, because I was as big at Anorak then as I am now, unfortunately. And the nice thing about this was when Dave suggested it, I wasn't really that keen, to be honest. I was a bit lukewarm because I know somebody who did a book. He basically got all the fans' memories and stuck them in a book, but he didn't edit them. He didn't change any grammatical errors, so he made a lot of people look a bit stupid.
Yeah, got ya.
And that's what was in my mind, and I thought, no, I'm not going down this route. And Dave Lane said, look, lots of people know you. You know loads of people. Just put it out there. I fired the idea off to a dozen people. They all come back saying how fantastic it was, and it was born. And I'll tell you what, it gathered pace. It gathered quicker than what Tony Morley could move.
And that was
it
fast.
was mad.
I'm looking through Graham Denton as well, who wrote the book about Ron Saunders. He's got an account in there, hasn't he?
Yes. We've actually got Dean. We've got Dean Smith, our old leader.
I noticed that. Turnstile's got a piece in there as well, hasn't he?
I'll tell you what. Can you remember the lad who wrote "We're All Going to Rotterdam"? You know that 1982 ditty that Mervyn King used on Desert Island Discs.
Yeah.
Well, that same Doug O'Brien, he sent pieces, and I'll tell you what. I'm not an academic. I write as somebody who's totally in love with Aston Villa.
Yeah.
Doug O'Brien, he loves the Villa no less than me, but the bloke, he is just an encyclopedia of history, of geography. His pieces, if you did a word count, he's probably got more words in that book than I have, but I couldn't leave any out. I just couldn't leave any out.
Fantastic. And Peter Fincham as well has got a piece, and Rick Barley. Again, members of our Facebook groups, etc., etc.
Yeah. Well, I was told the story of a lad called Lawrence Diggins.
Okay.
They went to Berlin in the second round. Just after we'd beaten Valor 7-0 on aggregate, we found ourselves going to the other side of the wall.
Yeah.
And they got to Checkpoint Charlie. This coach load of Villa players, Villa fans, sorry. And this one lad, they all had to fill in forms on this coach. And Lawrence had put place of birth, hospital. And this armed guard had retrieved all these visa cards, took them off the coach, come back on, and he's sort of getting a bit animated, saying, this isn't what we mean. And at that point, the bus driver put his head down on his arms and went, F&L, we're going to be here for hours. And they were. And then, so I had a few people tell me about this Lawrence Diggins and how they'd christened him Hospital.
Yes, I'm on that page, 222, wow. Lawrence Hospital Diggins.
Yeah. Well, the one night I got a phone call and this lad said, can I speak to Colin? And I said, this was like 11 o'clock at night. I thought, who's phoning me at this time? And it was this Lawrence Diggins. And as soon as he said his name, Lawrence, I went, bloody hell, Hospital. And he started laughing. He says, I haven't heard that for 40 years. And he told me the story. And, of course, we had to have him in. Dick Edwards, the old Villa centre-half, who was there, in the Doherty's era.
Yeah.
Dick Edwards, the lad who played the guitar.
Yep.
He was actually playing a gig in Brussels. And 5 or 6 reporters came in to cover the Villa game. And this was the final. They'd stopped in Belgium on the way through to Holland. They recognised Dick Edwards doing this gig with his former Torquay teammate Bruce Stuckey. They got talking and said, come to our hotel and we'll get you tickets for the final. So Dick Edwards, who was an absolute rock in defence for the Villa in his time, he went to the final. John Holder, who, that's a name that you'll recognise. He runs a Lions club now. I sometimes go to games with John now.
Yeah.
John was running Cheltenham Lions back in the day. A friend of his, Alan Brookfield, went with him. And John's youngest brother, I think he was 16-year-old or 15-year-old. His name's Martin. He couldn't go. So John, I don't know how old John was at the time, but John lent his younger brother the money to go to the final. And you think, wow, if John hadn't have done that, that lad would have missed out on, to me, and to all these lads, who got claret and blue eyes, this was bigger than man walking on the moon.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. What a wonderful achievement. Brilliantly put in this. And it isn't the case of they just do one account extract Hospital's put quite a few in there.
Because some of these
the boys
lads,
are all across it, yeah.
Paul Harvey, he's a friend.
Yeah.
Paul Harvey went to Valor to the away game.
Yeah.
There was, as he's walking into the ground, there's two packages of newspapers, and he took one and put it back on the bus. And his wife Heather was saying that he basically had 200 programmes, and I think he's still selling them to this day.
And that's what I love. It's an account of the various games, rounds, and the fans' memories of each and every round, including the final, isn't it? It's absolutely
lad I know,
brilliant.
Alan Wilson, great lad. He actually got one of Kenny Swain's socks.
Oh, right, left or right?
Yeah. Yeah, he got one of Kenny Swain's socks, and Tony Parton, a really, really good friend of mine, Tony Parton. He's not in the best of health at the minute.
Oh dear. Yeah.
He lives in America. He's had a few surgeries on his head.
Mm-hmm.
Tony's father, Reg, he used to be in charge of the press box at Villa Park in the 1960s.
Yeah.
So Tony was the surname Parton was a name that was recognisable to me from years and years ago. Now, I got to meet Tony when I was doing the research for Encounters of the Third Kind, and I was able to go and interview our reserve team coach from the third division days, a gentleman by the name of Leo Crowther.
Right.
Lovely bloke. He was the reserve team coach when Vic Crow and Ron Wiley looked after first team affairs, you know?
Yeah. And
then you had Frank Upton, who was like the fourth in the pyramid, and it was him that got the Villa to FA Youth Cup winners against Liverpool in 72.
Absolutely, and he changed Browne Little's position to an inside forward.
That's right. But Leo, I went to interview Leo. He had a beautiful house in these grounds, and the main house, it was like something that you would, you need a lottery up to get something like that. And Leo took me into this house. I didn't know who lived it. Well, he said it was his daughter's house.
Right.
I didn't know that his daughter Maureen had married this Tony Parton. Very, very successful bloke.
Right.
But I'm in the house. Leo's shown me all these wonderful one-off things of Aston Villa in this house. And then this bloke appeared, and he's like, he didn't say it, but he's probably thinking, what the hell's this? and I felt a bit uncomfortable, and I'm thinking he's going to take Leo's head off here. And I wittered something about I write books on Aston Villa or something lame, but me and Tony became great friends, and he's one of very, very few people. He's actually got every single bound volume of Aston Villa, and I don't think there's many people on this planet that have them.
Unbelievable accounts. And finally, chapter 6, the Super Cup. So it's not just winning the European Cup and accounts of winning the European Cup. It's there's a chapter of when Aston Villa won the Super Cup, and there's a lovely picture in there of Tony Barton celebrating with Villa coach, and sadly no longer with us, Roy McLaren. So
that's right.
Rest in peace to Roy. Another Holt Ender in the sky, sir.
Well, that only went in because I was working on a farm, and I was actually trying to sell my Ford Capri to finance going to Tokyo, because no way on earth did I want to miss out on watching Aston Villa become the best club side in the world.
Yes.
Unfortunately, they didn't do it, and unfortunately, I didn't sell my car. Nowadays, a Capri would be called a classic. Believe me, it wasn't a classic in them days.
Was that?
And I couldn't sell it in time. I had to have surgery on an accident that I sustained on the farm, so I probably wouldn't have been able to travel to Tokyo anyway. I did make do with going to see the Villa. The Villa played Arsenal on the Tuesday night. The game brought forward from the Saturday with the Villa going to Tokyo.
Yeah.
And what I did find out, the Villa were actually paid £40,000 for taking part in the World Club Championships.
Okay.
It's not a lot when you think about it, when you think what these players are on now. Now, with the Villa playing Arsenal on the Tuesday night, Arsenal had said to Aston Villa, if we played you on the Saturday, we'd get 25,000.
Yeah.
So anything under 25,000, you're going to compensate to us. Now, the crowd was 17,000 something, and it actually cost the Villa £20,000 for having that game played
Give us 60
on the
grand.
Tuesday.
Yeah.
So you got 20 grand for going to Tokyo instead of 40. And I think the players shared some of that out.
Unbelievable. Some brilliant encounters there. And the Villa Roll of Honour. And just before that, on page 252, a wonderful picture. Book author Colin Abbott with Dennis Mortimer at Villa Park, and the picture there of Dennis and Tony. And what a brilliant book. You must be so very proud of yourself, Cole, and your wonderful football club. And we will meet up again and do another podcast talking about your books going forward. It's been an absolute pleasure and an honour.
Thanks, Paul.
Talking about your wonderful books, Barton's Army and the Aston Villa, the big book of the 80s alongside the 70s and the first 150 years. You and David Lane, a match made in heaven, sir. Thank you very much. And
thanks very much, Paul. Sorry for not giving you time to talk. Take care, Paul.
Thanks, pal. Bye for now.
Ta-ra.
Bye-bye.
SRBMedia.
What a tremendous chat with Colin. And Colin, as he said there, he's got a new book coming out anytime soon about Villa in the 80s with Legends Publishing. David Lane is doing that. Very similar to the 70s book that Colin brought out a few years ago. And also his book, Barton's Army, which sits nicely alongside the Full Morty, because it tells the fans' stories of Aston Villa's triumph on that balmy night in May at Rotterdam Stadium, where Villa become European champions. And, you know, I suppose Villa fans will say, we don't do it the easy way. After a few minutes, Jimmy Rimmer goes off, and Dennis had said to me, we looked over, thought, where's he going? And then Spinky comes on in goal against Bayern Munich, and by his own words, I'll kind of calm it down a bit. He was cacking himself when he went on.
I bet he was. That's a great book, though, isn't it? About Barton's Army. Great book.
Absolutely. It's another one that I've got in my collection that I haven't read, but it is a great book. I love all these books. I just love the way that the books have, you know, years ago, before I started reading books, although I don't really read many books, as you know. I used to like the paperbacks, but now I'd never buy a paperback. It's got to be a hardback, a hardcover, and there's just something of beauty with hard books and hardbacks, and something of beauty as well. I'm going to go back. You can have a couple of picks now. It's your turn, but just do want to give a mention to the Cup. I know it came out last year, a pictorial celebration of the world's greatest football tournament, 150 years by Richard Whitehead. I've had the pleasure of Richard's company, and we have made a podcast about his book, The Cup. A big Villa supporter, and he did tell me about when he walked up Trinity Road going towards the Holt End when they got drawn against Southampton in the FA Cup in 1976, and his dad always used to say to him, whoever beats Villa wins the Cup, and that year he was right.
Yeah, absolutely. I want just to go back to that, the Barton's Army book, kind of thing. So obviously, you've not read the book, but it's great photos in that. I remember some of the images. I mean, there's one, like you've got the fans mixing in the streets, haven't you, before the final, and there's one I remember that with the police. And I can vaguely remember one of them, you know, took the police hat off and, you know, he's wearing it, etc. It's all that kind of, you know, that nostalgia and all that. But no, great book. And just going back to the Full Morty as well, that new book that's come out, because that's one that I wanted to pick out as well, because I've been sent a copy of it. So I forgot that he also played for Birmingham late in his career, didn't he?
Yeah, he got Birmingham.
You know, yeah. So before he became manager at Redditch United as well. Yeah. So and he was born in Liverpool. I don't know. I just assumed, you know, when I don't know, I assumed he was a Brummie.
Have you never listened to Dennis?
until you listen to him, when you realise, of course. So, born in Liverpool, of course, wasn't he? So,
mad Liverpool supporter. In one of the podcasts, Dennis was talking about going and watching Liverpool up at Hampden Park in a European Cup game, and he was saying how poor Hampden Park was. But he's got some great memories. He used to go and collect all the autographs of all the Villa players, the Liverpool players when he was a kid, and then of course many years after with Coventry and then Villa, he were playing against them. And certainly for Coventry, Gordon Milne was the manager. Who replaced Noel Campbell, who gave him his debut, and Ian St John, of course, was at Coventry for some time as well. So a few years ago, Dennis was collecting autographs of these heroes of his, and then he was teammates, and he was working for one of them as his boss. So football, you know, it is great that kid there that grew up in Kirby, played for Kirby Boys, in the same team as Kenny Swain as well. So as Kirby Boys playing with Kenny, all those years later, won the European Cup with the same Kenny Swain that they played with. And Dennis didn't realise that he'd swapped shirts, Kenny, and he found that out later and said, I'm going to have a word with him. Why would he swap shirts with a Bayern player? But you did in those days. They still do, of course. Maradona and Steve Hodge swap shirts. I'm not convinced that Maradona wanted Hodge's shirt, but Hodge definitely wanted Maradona's, and it went for a lot of money.
Yeah, I recall Dennis Morton, he's still trying to trace down his shirt from the European Cup final, actually. I'm sure I read that. It was either in the synopsis or somewhere in the book. I've read it somewhere. He's still trying to track down his shirt from the 1982, from the final. So I don't think he's ever found it. So I definitely read it somewhere about Dennis Morton.
Because when he lifted the cup, he still had the Aston Villa top on. And if you notice, he's minus the beard when he's lifting the cup. When he lifts the championship a year previously in May, early May, he's got the beard. Because what Dennis used to do is wear the beard through the season. As soon as the season was finished and the weather got a little bit warmer, he'd shave the beard off. He used to have the beard just for a bit more warmth around his mouth.
Excellent. Yeah. I do sometimes as well. Occasionally.
Yes. Well, lots of us do, and we're lucky. Females haven't got the same benefits as us, but there you go. That's another matter. But shaving is a pain in the backside, isn't it? So, especially when that 6 o'clock alarm rings and you get up, you wipe the sleep out of your eyes. The last thing you want to do is go in the bathroom and have a shave. So,
exactly.
Yeah, we do in the summer, but not in the winter. What else have you got for us, sir?
Well, keeping on a kind of localish theme, there's a book I've just received called A Marriage Made in Football. It's the story of Graham and Jane Hawkins. So Graham Hawkins, he spent his life working in football. He was born in Darlston, and he was signed by the legendary Stan Cullis at Wolves at age 16. And he went on and he played and he scouted and he managed his boyhood club as well. And so the book is, his life in football. And he went on to play for Preston North End. He made over 200 appearances. Then Blackburn Rovers made over 100 appearances, and also at Port Vale. But the book itself it's written by, I think it's his daughter-in-law.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Kirsty Hawkins is the author's name. Told by daughter-in-law Kirsty, tells the stories. So, but football took him all around the world, and he was never alone with his wife Jane, who always supported him until Jane no longer had Graham by his side. But this is the story. So, a great story about someone that's travelled the world. He even managed in Bahrain, and I think he had to finish there because of the Iraq invasion of Kuwait in 1990. So, very well travelled. But that's a new book that's just come out, A Marriage Made in Football. So I will be sharing it. I've not yet shared it on my socials. I've only just received a copy of it, but I look forward to reading that one. But you know the name.
I've certainly seen that somewhere because I am aware of that. In fact, on my Gabbie Cabbie Twitter account, she's just started following me today.
There you go.
I don't get these books like you. I mean, you are so famous. MyFootballBook.com are so famous.
Well, I must admit, it's been amazing. Over the last couple of, pretty long than that, so the last 6 months, I get inundated with requests, which is absolutely brilliant, really great. It just shows the appeal of the website, which is just mind-blowing. I still sometimes can't quite get my head around it. But obviously found out about myself. And one thing I just said is all the profits from this book go to Head for Change, a charity supporting former players and the families blighted by dementia, etc. So, so that's Marriage Made in Football. I'll share more about it on the socials and on the website in the coming days and weeks.
Yeah, fabulous. There's so many wonderful stories, isn't there, in football? You know, and stories that football have made and lives that football has given to so many people, you know, not just in this country, but globally. And when you look at it, I just don't think there's any other game like football. There's a romance, isn't there, with football? You know,
there is.
I remember when I did a podcast with Paul Fletcher, and I said to him, what was the most prized possession that you got out of the game? And he had to think about it, and he said, my wife. You know, I went, I think they got beaten. One of his mates was saying, come on, Fletch, come for a drink. And he said, no, I want to go home. And he said, no, come on, just go and have one, then you can go home. And he bumped in and met his missus. He knew of her. He used to walk past. I think she was a hairdresser, if I remember rightly. And so he actually finally got to talk to her, and then they eventually got married. But, you know, football just is, you know, when people see the one side of football, they don't see that romantic side of football. And, you know, there are so many stories, and brilliant that you've got the website, etc., and your socials, and you're promoting all these, and you're teaching me things, mate, because I look at your socials and I go, I didn't know that book. I'll have a look at that book. But, absolutely.
And it feels like that's quite a good linkage to the next one, because he reached out to me, and he's the author is called James Browne, and he's based out in America, and his books come out. Sorry?
Is he a Leeds fan? Is it that James?
Oh, I don't know. No, I don't think it's the same one that probably you're thinking of. Okay. Well, he may well support Leeds, but it's a book that's come out through Pitch. It's called Mud, Blood and Studs, and it's one family's legacy in soccer and rugby across 3 continents. Right. And so it's a really quite unique, special story, but it's about his whole family. I'm reading a bit from synopsis here, but an alcoholic father abandons his family in Troon, Scotland. He sails for America, and against all the odds, his offspring is 4 boys, and basically the family tree then is just incredible. So he's got his family, the well-known footballers, played at Manchester United. The kids gone on then to through other families, gone on to play for South Africa in the rugby. It's just all a great story from one generation to the next, and it's really expanded. It's like remarkable, you know, just how it's grown. And it's called Mud, Blood and Studs. And again, it's a great looking book as well. So on the front cover, it's quite, again, it just links to what you were talking about in terms of that family connection. And James Browne is the son of the original Jimmy Browne, who's the first character in this book, which I think is his great-granddad, etc. I think great-granddad, I think it is. So, but really interesting read. So, but again, a lesser-known story you wouldn't known until you read it and went, oh, well done, yeah. You may well know some of the names.
There's Jimmy Browne, a youth team captain at Villa in the 70s. I'm sure he was from Scotland.
He may well be. Well, yeah, he said 1932 he signed for Manchester United and then later for Spurs. I'm not sure if anywhere in between the line he made a play with Villa. I've not read it as of yet. Yeah, no, it might be another one. But
Terry Curran's also their family rugby players and footballers.
Okay.
Yeah. There's a mixture there of rugby and football in Curran's.
Well,
clan.
Yeah. Well, if you go back to the start of football, if you want to go back to the Victorian days, it's very linked to rugby. So there's lots of books around that as well. The very much the origins of football has its linkage to rugby.
And while we're talking Terry Curran, Sheffield was the place. and the rules that they adopted that really grew out of rugby, didn't they? And football took a different path.
Yeah.
Do you like rugby?
Absolutely. I could watch it. Yeah, I could watch it. Rugby union. Yeah. I don't mind watching the Six Nations. Sometimes like the Lions.
Yeah. I've never got into it.
I'm not massive. Yeah, I could watch it, but yeah, I could probably watch it in the background. Let's say.
Yeah, I tend to turn it off. I do. I'm not a great rugby fan. Just football. I mean, any other sport, if it's on, I might watch, but it just, but mind you, the way football's going at the moment, it's boring me. But I'm liking watching the women. I do like to watch the women play football. I think there's some really skillful young girls that we've got playing football. Jess Park is the latest one that I've noticed. Plays for Everton, scored a great goal the weekend against Liverpool in the Merseyside derby. And on loan from Manchester City. So yeah, I just look at it and I just think, wow. And going back to the history press, boys and girls, and I always say girls because there are girls, I'm sure, that work in these publishing houses. Isn't the greatest game coming out? Holland, Hungary versus England. That's going to be a new and another take, isn't it, on that infamous game of the century?
Yeah, absolutely. Written by a gentleman called Matt Clough, who's author of other books as well, including he did the biography of Nat Lofthouse.
Did he really?
Yeah, he did. Yeah, Nat Lofthouse, England's Lion of Vienna is the subtitle of that book called Lofty. It's just simply called Lofty. He wrote that. He wrote that biography, and that book's coming out. Yeah, Match of the Century, England, Hungary, and the game that changed football forever. So it looks a fantastic read. It's going to come out in November, and again, from History Press, and everyone knows about that game, don't they? So on 25th of November, 1953, it was.
It's that time of the year. Your vacation is coming up. You can already hear the beach waves, feel the warm breeze, relax, and think about work. You really, really want it all to work out while you're away. Monday.com gives you and the team that peace of mind. When all work is on one platform and everyone's in sync, things just flow. Wherever you are, tap the banner to go to Monday.com.
As dawn broke over the seven seas, the pirates of the Crimson Galleon set sail for adventure. But there was one problem. Paperwork. Mountains of it. Filing, invoices, you name it.
This work ain't fit for a pirate.
Luckily, their captain had an idea. She used the smart buying tools on Amazon Business so they could work more efficiently and get back to doing what they do best. I know, right? Amazon Business, your partner for smart business buying.
It was called the newspapers called it the Match of the Century before it even begun. But by the time it was over, it's 60 years on. It's there's something about that. It's such a well-known game and story.
Yeah, and the brains behind the Hungarian performance, of course, was Jimmy Hogan. Puska says of Jimmy, Uncle Jimmy. He taught us everything that we knew about football, and it was Gustav Sebes, who was the infamous coach manager of the Hungarian team. I've read quite a few books about the magical Magyars because I am quite, I wouldn't say obsessed, but I'm very, very interested in stuff like that, and certainly with the Hungarians. So I'm looking forward to looking at that book, reading that book, and cutting a podcast with Mr. Clough as well.
Yeah, excellent. Well, I look forward to listening to it. No, it looks a great read. Great read. Again, great publishing company as well.
Yeah,
History Press.
There's just so many brilliant. I mean, you mentioned Pitch, History Press there. David Lane with Legends Publishing, of course, that's doing Colin's books. There's loads of brilliant publishers and magazines, etc. And let's pay homage to the writers, because without people like that doing that, we wouldn't be reading about things that went on back in the day. Football, I've always said this, football, and I don't mean the fans and football, I mean the authorities and in particular, Sky, that stole the soul of football. They are the only people that actually don't recognise history. And when Sky do some historic programmes, it actually turns my stomach, because they always forget a match of the day. Don't get me started with match of the day. They should change their name. It isn't the match of the day. And I don't see how and why public money from the public purse should be paid to prop up and give a public relations broadcast for the most richest league in the world. I think it's an absolute disgrace. How they've got away with it for years, I just don't know. But it just does show that there's no backbone with our politicians. And I ain't even going to start on that Gary Neville, because he is very selective in what he does and what he says. And I've not heard him or anybody else, when they're looking at football and the greed of football, it starts with Europe and the European competitions and the Super League, as I call it, not the Champions League. It filters down from that. So they want to have a go at the little bits and pieces that they want to have a go at, because it publicly, the sound bites, gives him votes. I just don't like that. If I met him, it's probably we'd get on, but I just don't like where he comes from and how he selects the little bits and pieces that he wants to drive that narrative forward.
You won't be buying his new book then? It's just come out, Gary Neville. He's just brought a book out called The People's Game.
No, I wouldn't.
And it's sometimes a view of the front seat in football, but going back to the Super League bit, I find it incredible that it's, how did you, if you remember the uproar during the pandemic, wasn't it? Suddenly, everyone's against the idea, but they've kind of changed it in the background. It's still very much prevalent that there's now going to be this. It's based on the history of the clubs, where they'll get automatic qualification into this Champions League. But the history is only based on the last 30 years, not based on your Villa of the '82 Forest and further back.
It's based on Champions League history, not European Cup.
Champions League
history. So, what kind of history is that? It's like, it's almost, no, it's nothing like the Germans with the propaganda, how they destroyed lots of records of the past, and in particular Jewish, and there was a Jewish team that they actually destroyed all the records, and then they didn't exist. But, on a much smaller scale, that's pretty much the avenue that these people are going down. Well, let's do it on historical achievements. All right, then, let's go back to the 50s. No. Our historical achievement starts with the Champions League. Well, that ain't bleeding history, is it? You can't just pick a period of time and say, we're going to be just looking at history 30 years, when the football game's been going for 150 bloody years.
I know. I know that I class myself as a football historian, but I've read a lot of football books, and it's always interesting when you look at the last 30 years. There's been times in go back to Victorian times, the rise of football, 60s and 70s, especially the 70s, of course. There's an era that was magical era, but at that time there was still a recognition that it was still to be kept within a certain area. And what I mean is not to go too far. And I don't know how sometimes I have to put it, but the modern day football is there just as a bandwagon of making money of it and trying to change it. And the top clubs, every club, if you go for all the years, think of Huddersfield, even going back to the 1920s, they won back-to-back leagues kind of thing, but they didn't change the rules to suit them at that time. No club has changed the rule, but they are doing it now because they recognise how much money can be made from it. And then you can bring in VAR because that we can't afford mistakes anymore by referees, etc. It just again ruins the whole experience for me. It's my first time of watching VAR live very recently.
Oh, it's great,
in the ground, and it was just bizarre. I don't know how even how to explain it. It just didn't feel. I don't know who was. It's like us watching it at the game. Who's more important? The people who are outside of the grounds, at home, watch it on the telly, or us? It's very strange, but anyway.
I'll tell you who's most
I
important.
could go off on one.
I'll tell you who's most important. The ones sitting at home watching football. And not the ones in this country, the ones in Asia. Them are the ones that they want to tap into that market. They get more money from overseas broadcast rights than what they do from UK broadcast rights.
That's fine. I don't argue it being spread around the World Cup. It's popularity, etc. It's great for the game of football, but don't suddenly cut everyone else off because you're doing well at it. You can't now have a piece of the pie.
Yeah.
Because now we're in it. We're making the clubs of that. Anyway, there you go.
It's an absolute disgrace. It is an absolute disgrace. The more money that comes into the game, the more cheaper it should be for the fans.
Yeah.
That's what it should be.
Absolutely.
And VAR, well, there's actually nothing wrong with the VAR. It's the idiots that are using it. They can't use the technology. They don't know what they're doing. That's the problem. When you're at a football game, I've been down Villa Park when goals have been scored and all of a sudden it's chalked off. What the bloody hell's going on here? I mean, and we've said on podcasts with Terry when it first come out, they're going to cause a riot one of these days on a really, really important issue where, promotion is gained or you've got relegated or, to win the league, etc., or on a contentious decision at the final hurdle in the last game in the night. Imagine Aguero when he scored that goal and they're all going wild and they're going, hang on, we're going to VAR, it's cancelled now.
There was an offside 2 minutes earlier. I know it's ridiculous, isn't it?
Or somebody tripped somebody up in the build-up, so your goal's disallowed. There would have been carnage. And one of those days there will be, because these clowns that run football don't know how to run the game. And, when you're looking at the Super League and you're looking at the way football and too many games, make all competitions in Europe knockouts. Keep the League Cup, keep the FA Cup, keep the game as it is in this country, because we're actually playing less domestic games than we've ever played in any era, in any decade ever. But you never hear these muppets and puppets that they give a microphone to. So when a manager or a Gary Neville, and they're all going on about the game and how it needs to change. Well, can we change it from the Champions League? Because that's where all the ills start, from the very top. The root to all evil is the money, isn't it? And this season, you could not get a better example of where the World Cup is. In this, and being bang middle in the normal season for everyone else, and that's literally all about money. So whatever you say, not like the World Cups in the 70s, blood on a crossbar, for instance. The Dictatorship World Cup by Reece Richards.
Yes, great pullback. Yeah, absolutely. Let's get back to the good old days. So that's a fantastic. There's great books coming out around this time as well, with the World Cup coming on the horizon. And Reece Richards, isn't it? So blood on the crossbar. So
not like the World Cup was ever bought, in the 70s.
Absolutely.
The Argentinian hunter or junter or whatever you used to call them, bodies going missing and ending up in the River Plate, and games of football that they needed to win 6-0 to qualify, and guess what? They won 6-0 and qualified.
They did.
Nothing bad ever went on in the 70s in World Cups. And another book I do briefly want to mention here, From Beauty to Duty, a football history of Uruguay, 1878 to 1917. So from the birth to the First World War, by Martin de Cruz. So 2 books there from South America. One looks as though he's got a South American name, but the other one sounds like a taff.
Yes, it does.
Reece Richards.
Yeah.
What do you know about either book? Have you read them? I know I've seen you promoting them.
Not yet. Well, The Beauty for Duty doesn't come out. It comes out next Monday, actually. The one on the football history of Uruguay. So I'm sure it'll be landing with me at some stage. But it's a great story. Again, I've read the synopsis of the book, and it's it's the early Olympic World Cup triumphs, isn't it, of Uruguay? So. But it looks a fascinating story. But I don't know anything about the author Martin de la Cruz, apart from I know he's a football historian. and it's just interesting. I love these these kind of ones that go back to the history, the origins, etc. It's great for another great looking front cover on that particular one as well.
Great. I love both of them.
The stands, and then it's all the flat caps, etc. The people watching the game. So that could be an image. That could be an image in Villa, Birmingham, London, but it's Uruguay. It's the same image, isn't it? And I just love that kind of football is same anywhere in the world when you break it down. Certainly in those days. So it's a great image. Yeah, looking forward to that. And another one that's coming out related to the book one you've probably got on your list is the 1970 Brazil team.
I thought you was going to say that. I was just going to say that before you jumped in and beat me to the word. Yeah. Say his name there, clever bugger. Say his name.
Yeah. Say his name.
The fella that wrote the book. You say his name. I'll let you do this.
Oh. Yes. I can. Yeah.
Not Samandra. The other one.
Yeah. Yes. It's that one, isn't it? So it starts with a K. Yeah.
Samandra, couldn't he?
Yeah. That's it. That's a good way.
I mean,
isn't it?
He's got to be foreign. He must be foreign.
I would have thought so.
I don't know anything about the author. Do you? I know quite a lot about how the Brazil team won the 70 World Cup and the beautiful team, and again, a beautiful cover. Yeah,
no, absolutely. And what a team that is. He's a regular contributor to World Soccer, the BBC,
right,
and he features in the Blizzard. You're probably familiar with that?
Yeah, Jonathan Wilson's group.
That's it, that group there. So, I have come across his name before as well. So I think it's his first book. I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's his first book. I don't recall it.
Is Chris Lee, or has Chris Lee got another book out or coming out?
He has. And I think without trying to repeat ourselves, if you want to see a book cover, I think this one knocks it out of the park. It really does. It's called The Defiant. It's the history of football against fascism. And it comes out in a couple of weeks. That's Chris Lee from Outside Right. Wonderful front cover. It really is. It's something, quite simple imagery. Whoever's designed it, it's going to get in a lot of sales just by the look of the cover. But that's a good, it's a great read that's coming out. He's a great podcaster, is Chris Lee.
Yeah, he is. Absolutely top drawer.
Yeah. Just going back to that 97 Brazil, sorry, I was just going to say...
97 Brazil team? What 97? What 97 Brazil team?
Yeah. I think it was called the Brazil... when it first came out, or has been promoted, it was called the Beautiful Team. But it's now... I think they changed the title of the name to 1970 Brazil.
I thought you said 97.
I did, yeah.
You threw me on. What 97? Where are you going? That was pre-France. That must have been Latournois when Barthez picked the ball out the back of there. I thought, what the hell's going on here? What's the crowd going wild for?
The fraudulent slip. 1970 is what I meant then. Apologies then, I forgot that right. But what a great World Cup that was. But getting held in Mexico, wasn't it? So
a bit too young to remember that World Cup, if I'm honest. I was born in 64, so I would have been 5 at the time, because I was born in November, so I'd been 5. I don't really remember it that well, but Gordon Banks was my first football hero, so possibly it was that save against Brazil. With the beauty of being able to research, watch on YouTube, look at the goals that the Brazilians scored, and that goal from Carlos Alberto, arguably one of the greatest. I would say that goal and Maradona's were the two greatest goals that I've seen recorded. I'm not saying that, because, there's been a lot of goals scored that have never been recorded, but those two that were recorded, I think, was probably the best two that I've ever seen. And the Brazil, how Brazil won the 1970 World Cup by Samindra Conte or Kunte, or however you say his name. But,
and it was their third title, which basically allowed them to keep the Jules Rimet trophy as it was then. They permanently kept it. Obviously, the now World Cup, as it looks, came in 1974.
Yes, it did. And while we're talking about books, let's give a shout out to Gary Thacker's book, that wonderful these football times. Gary does a great job. His latest book is, of course, Chelsea in 2012, when they went and won the European Cup. They won the FA Cup and the European Cup, Champions League, as it was back then, of course. And he's got a book coming out in next year, I think, about Ajax in the 70s. So that's going to be a fantastic read. But Beautiful Bridesmaids Dressed in Orange was Gary's book. So we've got there the beautiful team how Brazil won it in 70. Gary's book about the 1974 Holland team. And then 1978 Blood on the Crossbar. And then, of course, Stuart Horsfield wrote that great book about Brazil in 1982 as well. So, you know, that pretty much the World Cups of my lifetime. That first one, don't remember that much. But then 1986, and then we had Italia 90, 94 we didn't qualify. But there's pretty much a book about all the World Cups, and there's a recent book that's come out about the 1994 World Cup I've seen promoted on your website and socials.
Yeah, it's very popular as well. So, no, I've got the book as well. So, USA 94 by Matthew Evans. So he's written extensive. I've seen a lot of his writing. I think he's wrote in these Football Times and also Nutmeg magazine. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's more a Scottish-based
Scottish, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's linked with one of my favourite authors. Oh my goodness, his name's gone completely out of my head. I think he'll come back to me in a minute for Nutmeg as well.
Don't think about it. If you don't think about it, it'll really come to you quickly. It's almost as though, like you're playing for Forest. It's Monday night. You're playing in the game. Monday night football. The ball's come through to you, Andy Satchwell. You're in on goal. The Leicester City goalkeeper is coming out to you. You're composed and you just stick it in the onion bag. When you get up about it, it goes over, and then it's up the River Trent. Although this game, I think, he's played at Leicester, so it would be one hell of a bad shot to end up in the Trent from Leicester.
It would, it would. And that's author is Daniel Gray. So Daniel Gray, he's wrote a number of excellent books, and he's got another one coming out soon, actually. But that I went off. USA 94, is an excellent book. Again, out through Pitch. They came out recently. Another memorable World Cup as well for different reasons. Obviously, one that England didn't play at.
No, we didn't. I love the picture of the front cover of this book as well. Get Shirty, The Rise and Fall of Admiral Sportswear by Andy Wells.
Yeah, excellent. Back in the 70s, they're a small Midlands underwear firm. It was underwear firm. Changed football, didn't they? When they won the contract as England's kit supplier, Admiral.
I think that was down to Don Reevy, wasn't it? In some backhand. Payments, if I'm honest. Yeah.
No, it's a brilliant look. I've got that book. So it's based on it was a popular ITV documentary, Get Shirty.
Oh, okay.
So it's the writer-director Andy Wells, definitive, lavishly illustrated account of the untold Admiral story. It's just brilliant book, and just a nostalgic trip down memory lane. And they're another great author, I should say, Conquer Editions. They do a number of books. They did Got's Not Got football books, which you're not familiar with, the Lost World of Football series.
Loads of them, ain't there? Them Not Gots and that.
There is. The great ones. Which neatly ties me into one I would like to mention for Conquer Editions as well, that I shared recently, called Black and White Stripes. And it's the greatest collection of Newcastle United match-worn shirts. So there's an amazing, you ever go on the internet, it's amazing how many people love football shirts and collect football shirts, etc. But you don't necessarily need to be a Newcastle fan, but flicking through it, you recognise some of the shirts going right back to the 60s and Bombogker in the 1970s, etc. It's a great little book. of match-worn shirts, and that's again out through Conquer Editions, written by Gavin Hay.
So, with the shirts, does it just show you the picture, or are there stories behind the picture of the match-worn shirts? How do the dynamics work in this book?
Yeah, so the way we do it, they pick out, so they pick out, so for example, I'll just flick through it, one in particular, you've got Warren Barton, so you've got a particular shirt, this is from the 1998-99 Cup Winners' Cup, and so basically it's a story, it's a picture of the shirt, and then a little bit of a story about that particular shirt and linking it to the player who wore it. Yeah. So that particular one's Warren Barton, and if I flick through back, if you go back to... there's Moncur. Yeah, so Bob Moncur, it's got him in 1973-74 when they were in Division 1, and a picture again of a shirt that he wore, and then a little bit of a story around that shirt as well, and that season. So it's a great way of linking history back to the shirt, because shirts tell you so much, don't they? There's lots of iconic shirts out there. Some of the shirts you look at nowadays, they're a bit outlandish, aren't they? But when you keep it nice and simple, some of them, simple's best. Yeah,
we spoke about that in the podcast this week with Terry. Yeah. And
right.
Yeah, some of the England shirt, for instance, it looks like a training top. Manchester City's top these days looks like a training top, but they were iconic shirts back in the day. Yeah. Again, something else in football that isn't as good today as what it was back then is the football shirts, and taking it back to Admiral, iconic shirts. And Cocker Hoop is a book that's come out, written by David Cocker, and the other fella's name escapes me. But it's about Les Cocker, isn't it? So whenever you think about Don Reaver, you automatically think about Les Cocker as well. Yeah. Very instrumental in the glory days of Leeds United, and certainly with England. And it was Robert Endicott and Dave Cocker. Pitch Publishing out now. Lovely couple of pages in Back Pass magazine by John Cully. It's called Bookshelf. And also it gives a shout out to Heroes in the Shadows, the story of Don Howe, English football's greatest coach, by David Tossell. Big fan of David's work, and I did a podcast with David with his All Crazy Now book, which is about the 1970s. And when I'm looking down here as well, Newcastle United, The Great Days, 1904 to 1911 by David Potter. Again, Pitch Publishing, and we have covered that, haven't we, in the the podcast previously?
Yeah, we have. Yeah, lots of great books coming out from Pitch as well. And one I'd like to give a shout out that came out there fairly recently, bringing it back to the 80s. This is called Groundwork, which is the inside story behind Jim Smith's Derby County. Yes. And it's written by Ryan Hills. He's wrote a couple of books on Derby County. His first one was called Pride. It was based on the 21st century Derby. It was written before they've had the last few years of many issues, haven't they? But this is a book, Jim Smith's Derby County, when he took. No, sorry, it was in '95. So when I said 80s, I threw myself there. He took charge of Derby County in the summer of 1995. And the club needed balance in the books at that time, and after several seasons failed to reach the Premier League. Little was expected of him, but he was alongside Steve McLaren.
I was going to say, I'm sure McLaren was it. Yeah. Wasn't Marco Gabbiadini? He was around in them days as well for Derby, if I remember.
Yeah. One of the legends, so to speak, was Igor Stimac, if you remember that name. So he's an absolute great he is for Derby fans.
Because they spent a load of dough, didn't they, Derby? Really went heavy on the spending. And then when Jim had it and Steve McLaren come in as a coach, they got promoted. Pretty much they got rid of all the big name players and brought in other players. Wasn't Kitson in that team as well?
Kitson, I think he was, yeah. So
Paul Kitson, wasn't it?
Paul Kitson, that's it, yeah. It says here, Smith built a team side capable of matching the very best in English and amassing an array of international talent almost never been seen before. And it was bankrolled by a local businessman called Lionel Pickering.
Okay.
Who threatened to become a major force in the English game again. So, he was known as the Bold Eagle, wasn't he, Jim Smith?
Oh,
I seem to remember.
Well, I mean, he was Blackburn Rovers manager, and then he comes to Birmingham City. I think he got sacked. He really got shat upon by Birmingham City's board because Aston Villa had they hadn't got rid of Doug Ellis. There was a lot of boardroom upheaval in them days. Doug was around, the Bendels were around, they were changing chairman, and I think it was the 9th of February 1982.
Yeah.
The night before that, Dennis had a conversation on the phone with Ron, and Ron had said, "I'll see you at training tomorrow." He never turned up. He left. He walked out on Aston Villa, and he took the managerial job at Birmingham City. So he went across the city from Villa to Birmingham. His first game in charge of Birmingham at St Andrews was against the Villa. And his last piece of the jigsaw, Peter With, scored the winning goal for Villa, and they beat Birmingham City 1-0. I remember being at that game. I remember Birmingham City fans singing, "We'll take more care of you, Saunders," and Villa fans shouting, "You must be fucking mad, Saunders, Saunders." But
Did Jim Smith then go on to Oxford after that?
He went to Oxford, and he'd done really well with Oxford. In fact, Jim's my favourite Birmingham City manager. I think Jim was a great manager, great character. Loved to play good football, worked with some fantastic football players, and a really great football man and manager, Jim Smith for me. So all the very best, and sadly not with us any longer.
A few years back, wasn't it, when he passed away?
It was a right few years back. So I phoned up Oxford and I was trying to get an interview with Jim, but he at that time he wasn't very well, so we couldn't. But sadly missed a great manager and a great man of football. The longest winter, a season with England's worst ever football team by Mark Hodgkinson. I don't know if you've got the book. I'll look at the book.
I have.
I think it's a great cover. Is it Rochdale? Rochdale, isn't it the worst team ever?
It is. It is.
To be fair.
No, absolutely. But no, based on the 73-74 season, he's a great writer, Mark Hodgkinson. He wrote another book, was called The Overcoat Men, focused on Rochdale as well. And it was on that story. That particular book was focused on the story of two men who saved the club's existence in the early 1980s. But this book, The Longest Winter, goes back to 97-74 season, where I think they won just 2 games in 46. But what's great about that book is it says that I think they used 32 players, but many of them were drafted in from amateur or Sunday league clubs just to make up the numbers. So it's a great. And it's a fabulous story. But again, great reminder of those times. In fact, it does say on the synopsis, it's quite interesting the timing of when you think back to those times, because it was Britain was basically in a meltdown. It was the Arab-Israeli war. Energy prices are soaring like they are now.
Exactly, not much change,
offices, because of the weather, they were limited to temperature of 17 Celsius, and power cuts were frequent. The 3-day working week came in as inflation took hold, and the miners and workers, miners and the other workers went on strike. It's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
50 years on, you could almost read the same thing. I'm just waiting to see what team is going in the Rochdale version in 2022-23.
I thought it was going to be Birmingham at one stage, but there you go.
But no, it looks a really great read. It's a great author, so I'm sure that'll be a fantastic. So, and again, like you said, great looking title, great looking cover, isn't it?
Yeah,
The Longest Winter.
But it does take a lot of doing, doesn't it? Just winning 2 games. Although going back to the Premier League with Derby, they had that horrendous season, didn't they? They didn't win. How many games did they win? I think they didn't win much more than 2, did they?
I think it might have been 1 or 2, but I certainly remember it was 11 points because as a Forest fan, one of the main things this season is to get to 12 points, which sounds daft, I know, but we don't want to go down as the worst team in history, which is obviously what we talk about of Derby County. So, as you do about your rivals. So it's always about when we win that, or if it'll be a draw, and hopefully it'll be at the City Ground. It'll be the biggest cheer ever, even if it's the last game. You know, we get to 12 points. That's enough.
But I mean, like with 3 points for a win now, so they're 6. So they've only, I mean, they probably did only win 2. So, you know, you could argue that Derby County were the worst team ever, and you know they had a much bigger budget than what Rochdale would have had. And I don't remember him taking anyone from Sunday League football to play for Derby. Although when you watch Derby, there looks as though there were a few players of that level of football, wasn't there? Back in the day.
Yeah. Interesting manager as well, of course, in Billy Davies. So he famously came over to Forest as well. So quite a character, to say the least.
Yeah,
I don't think the journalist missed him. He was sorry, Paul.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden you didn't hear anything else of Billy Davies. At one stage it was like Billy Davies for, you know, every job that was going in football, and then I think managers, when they're out for a certain amount of time, it's like, oh, that's it, finished now. You never heard of them again.
Yeah. Oh, it was famous. I can remember lots of quotes about players saying he could literally have an argument on his own. In a room, so it was a fiery character, to say the least.
Another book here I'm looking in on the bookshelf in Backpass magazine. In the Shadow of Ben Bulben, that's one hell of a name, isn't it? Ben Bulben. Dixie Dean at Sligo Rovers by Paul Little, again Pitch Publishing. William Ralph Dixie Dean retired as a footballer in 1938. He was only 31, but the injuries acquired in 16 years as a professional footballer were taking its toll. His attempt to prolong his career with Notts County following his departure from Everton had run out of road. He announced he was embarking on a new career as a talent scout. And then it goes on, my reading is awful, so I'm not going to bore you with the reading. But he did end up at Sligo Rovers, didn't he?
Yeah,
for a season, and this book looks at that season. Blimey, he did his best, but the IRA were mounting a bombing campaign at the time, and none of the players approached wanting to go. But I mean, it is difficult recruiting players at that time, isn't it, as well, when people are bombing up, you know.
Absolutely. But it's fondly remembered, of course. Yeah, fondly remembered Dixie Dean, isn't he? That particular book, it's... he was. I think he was only there for 4 months. I think it was. If I remember rightly,
it wasn't long. No, it wasn't long. But I mean, they're going to do well if they get 250 pages out of 3 months, aren't they? But he has gone down as a legend, mind you. Would do. It's Dixie Dean, isn't it?
Yeah. You probably could fill out a good book about Dixie Dean. So Well, what a legend he was, wasn't he? Certainly in his obviously his days at Goodison Park.
Absolutely.
Excellent.
Still the greatest that Everton have ever seen, and I think Dixie still holds a record for the most goals ever scored for one team. Dixie, pretty much his goals for Everton Football Club. I think he scored something over 250 goals, something absolutely ridiculous. I think it was more like 350 goals for Everton. I've not got the facts to hand, but Dixie Dean, what an absolute legend. You've got Blue Matt, you've got Dixie, and you've got Jimmy, the 3 greatest goal scorers that we've ever seen in this country. Yeah,
phenomenal goal scoring record.
Yeah. What you got next, mate?
Well, picking up on pitch again. So I'm going back now to the 84-86 season. This is about Sheffield Wednesday.
Okay.
And Back in the Big Time by John Dyson.
Yeah.
So this is Sheffield Wednesday's return to Division 1, 1984-85 to 86. It tells the story of the Owls' first 2 seasons back in the top flight after 14 years in the wilderness. So that would have been...
Howard, wasn't it, that took them back?
Yeah, so the slow climb back was under Jack Charlton and Howard Wilkinson. Howard Wilkinson's team, they finished 5th in Division 1 after just 2 years. And they embarked on cup campaigns that I think they come close to Wembley as well, rightly. So, but that's written by John Dyson. I think he's wrote a couple of books on Sheffield Wednesday. So, the front cover in the background, it was one of the best stands, the Spine Cup at Hillsborough. It's phenomenal, isn't it?
There's a picture. Yeah. Well, it's the picture on the front of Grandad, What Was Football Like in the 70s?
It is.
Santos.
That book.
Yeah, Santos, when they played in the Spine Cup there, phenomenal. But Terry Curran just missed out on that because TC, you say to Jack, if we bought him, I think, got no idea it was Verardi who he was talking about, bringing in Verardi. Might have been Mick Lyons who he was talking about bringing in, and another player. I know there was 3 players that Terry said to Jack, bring them in and we'll get promoted, but Jack didn't. And I think then when Howard took over, he did bring in them players and they got promoted. So TC weren't far wide of the mark, but at that time, of course, he'd left Sheffield Wednesday in the mid-80s. Yeah,
he left him.
Carving out a career at Everton Football Club, but again, got a bad injury like what he did at Nottingham Forest.
Yeah, that's it. He left Wednesday in 82, didn't he? So a couple of years before that. So
he was off to Sheffield United. He moved to Sheffield United. There was a problem over signing on fee, I believe. But there you go. Jack not paying a tax on it, and then he come back and said he would, but he'd already done the deal with Reg, and he took him to Sheffield United. But it didn't go down very well. But there you go. That's what happens in football. We all move on. And there's still a lot of Wednesday fans that remind him now. And some of them still haven't forgiven him. And you think, I had this, not a debate or a row, but I just said to this bloke the one day on T's official page, how old are you? Like, get over yourself. It's the early 80s. It's like 40 years. And I still ain't forgiven you, Terry. That's football fans. Mad.
That's it. We all hold grudges one way or another. Some do. You mentioned Richard Crooks because you did mention the 70s, 1970s, what football was like, and it would be remiss of me not to mention then the book he came out last month was what football was like in the 1990s. So he completed his 60s, 70s, 80s, and now in the 90s, and obviously as we've talked about earlier in this podcast, how it changed from those early years of the 90s. But so Richard Crooks, I look forward to reading that one as well and getting his view on how it's changed when I compare it to back what he wrote about the 70s and obviously the 80s, etc. So it'll be interesting.
Absolutely. What I love
about the dynamics changed.
What I love about them books is it's got the league. The end of the Football League or the league tables in there, hasn't it? Yeah. I love looking at league tables and stuff like that, the facts and that. I think it's fascinating to look at the 10 league, 10 year and how the teams have progressed or digressed over a 10-year period and over a 40-year period, unbelievably. And then you can look at, when they start the Premier League, when football was actually formed in the 90s, of course, in that year, and how many teams now are still in the Premier League that played in that first Premier League. That'd be a very interesting observation, because there's an awful lot that probably are not even, Oldham are even not in the league now that were in the first Premier League, wasn't they? Yeah,
absolutely. It's very different, isn't it? I can remember when they promoted the first Premier League, didn't they, on Sky, which was, I forget what the slogan was. Was it a new ball game? The whole new ball game, that's it. Yeah. So I'm pretty sure Oldham were playing. So I'm just thinking of some of the more obscure clubs. I think Oldham were in that first ever.
Sure they were, yeah.
Yeah, and Sheffield Wednesday were, I'm sure they were. Ipswich Town?
I would
Just
say
trying to think of some of the clubs.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah.
There would be a number of, I mean, I'm not too sure whether Barnsley was in the first one, but certainly Barnsley and Swindon had a time in the early years of the Premier League. There's, if you look at, I mean, apart from the big six, if you like, of Liverpool and Arsenal and Chelsea.
Yeah.
I don't think Chelsea have been relegated, have they, from the Premier League? Well, certainly Arsenal haven't.
I don't think so.
Arsenal haven't, Everton haven't, and Liverpool, and we'll just stick at that. And Manchester United, of course, haven't. But Manchester City have had their time in League One. But how times change in football. So you're absolutely right to look at that from the 60s through to the 90s. And I'm sure that Richard will go on and write another book in the 2000s. And you look through the decades of football. Because once you've started that from the 60s and you've done the 70s, you've done the 80s, you've done the 90s, you've actually got to do the 2000s and then the next decade, haven't you? You've almost got to do it. It's like with Dan Abrams, he's done his 1971-1972 football season. You've got to do all of them then. Once you've started that, you've got to have a series where you finish it. Again, going back to when we started with Stephen's books about the European Cup, the Cup Winners' Cup, the UEFA Cup. As soon as you've done one book, you've got to do the two. And as soon as you do the two, and I'm sure he probably never set out with the idea of a trilogy, but you have to, don't you? Because you go, you know what? I've just got to make it up because it's imbalanced if I don't. So best of luck, Richard, going forward for your next two books. Of those.
That'd be great. Be great to look back, isn't it? It's almost like almost like if you want to say like the books like Bible, isn't it? A testament, isn't it? But be look back in many, many years to come to read about the 60s, read about the 70s, and see how it's evolved. And obviously it has changed a hell of a lot, hasn't it? But just tying it in, because you mentioned about the early days of the 90s, another book that has been sent to me again through Pitch is League One Leeds. They were in the first ever Premier League. And this is The Journey Through the Abyss, and it's written by probably one of the best-sounding authors' names I've seen, Rocco Dean. His name is Rocco Dean. Love that. Yeah. So he's written a number of books, but this is about League One Leeds, and it's the story of Leeds United's 3 seasons they spent in the third tier of English football. So when they really went down, and if you love the tables as well, it has the tables in here of each of those seasons, which is great as well. It's good to see in terms of where they were and where they, how they come up. Because they started off, as you remember, they had a 15-point deduction that plunged them from promotion favourites to relegation, fodder basically. But they went on record-breaking winning runs. But during it, they still had the FA Cup defeats, if you remember, at Histon. And Hereford as well. It's a great little account of a fascinating period in Leeds United's history and more recent history as well. And that's by Rocco Dean. The forwards by Simon Grayson, who was the manager for that period as well. So
not adverse to the old giant killing act, are they, Leeds United? Remember 71 with Colchester?
Yes,
Ray
absolutely.
Crawford and all, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, who gives you all these books from Pitch? But what's your contact at Pitch?
Well, I can't show that on here because everyone want to do it. So, but obviously, this has been. It feels weird to be saying this, but how it's grown in popularity, the social media and the website. It has attracted publishers to me, and one of the massive benefits of this, whilst I'll never make a living out of this, it has out where I get books sent to me because it just in return to share their book through social media. And I quite often now, I don't do book reviews as much as I used to because I know, because it just takes, it's long enough reading the book, then write them a whole review about it. I'm not an author. Maybe one day, let's see. But I do feature posts, so I'll do like a summary of the book, again, using like the synopsis, But yeah, I get a lot of books sent to me. And pitch, there's a guy there, and I've spoken electronically with the lady. It's I think there's two of them that own Pitch Publishing, and I get books sent to me, which is in return for promoting them.
Lovely,
of course, as well.
Well, you tell Pitch, you send the book to you. Cause pointless sending it to me. I don't read anything. Send the book to you. You read the book. You tell me what the book's about, and I'll interview them.
Absolutely, yeah, more than happy to.
That's how it works. That's how it works.
Now, every author, that's one of the beauties. That's like it's an upside of what I do. I love reading football books, anyway. And the upside of it, I get to promote books. I get to promote the great authors out there. You know, it's like it's almost like a self kind of feeling of I'm helping people because, you know, when there's a book going out and in October, next month, there's 45 new books coming out, which I've never known as many. I've never known in all my time that many books. And because of that, they want that promotion. You know, they need to get out there, the podcast, etc., promote them. And I'm more than happy to, as you are as well, Paul, to help promote them and get that word out there because there's a lot of great stories to tell.
Absolutely.
And, a lot of great mixture of stories.
Absolutely.
Well, so.
But you're right, the football book industry has really grown, hasn't it? And it's great. It's great that it's grown. And Pitch, I don't know how they've done it, but they are, you know, without being disrespectful, and there's lots of great publishers, and I'm sure that Pitch have probably got more money than the other publishers, but, you know, they have done such a great job. And I love everything about Pitch Publishing. I love all the logoing and the way they promote it. I just think they're really spot on, really professional. And as I say, again, this is the difference between you and I, Andy. You're famous and I'm not. I've contacted Pitch and I get nothing back. You contact Pitch.
Just drop my name and then,
Exactly. I might do that now. I might say I'm Andy from My Football Books.
It's open source.
They might talk to me then. They might talk to me.
Yeah. I wish I was that famous. I really.
But there you go. But all joking apart, what a wonderful job Pitch Publishing do, as do all of the other publishing houses that publish fantastic football books and magazines as well. So let's not forget the magazines because they do a valuable job.
Absolutely.
So well done all. What have you got? What's coming out in October? What's in your newsletter? Anything that we haven't already spoken about? I do want to give you my last title. England Football, the biography, 1872 to 2022 by Paul Hayward. That looks a fabulous book as well. Again, I've seen it being promoted and I thought, Rob Stewart was promoting it the other day. He's a journalist and he writes for Backpass, doesn't he? And I noticed it on his socials and I thought, that looks interesting. So I share it and that's what I do. If I find things interesting, I share.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, that's that's what I was going to mention actually. So you beat me to it because that comes out next month in October.
Yeah,
it's the biography from 1972 to 2022. So Paul Hayward, that author, this is his first standalone book. But he's he was a chief sports writer at Daily Telegraph. I can bring them all up. Daily Telegraph, Guardian, Observer, Daily Mail. He's been 5-time sports journalist. Sports Writer of the Year. He's co-written the autobiographies of Michael Owen, Sir Bobby Robson, Sir Alex Ferguson. This man he's one of the. I'm amazed. This is his first book on his own. You know, when I just rolled off that really, and the amount of books he's been linked to and his writing credentials. So, but that's going to be a really interesting book, just based on his talents really. So, that comes out, and it's going right back from when the first game when England took on Scotland in Glasgow in 1872.
0-0.
regarded as the first international fixture and enthralled those 5,000 people with a 0-0 game, yeah. But there's something lovely about 0-0 sometimes, aren't they? Yeah. 0-0s can be glorious as well, can't they?
Well, they can be, and the only way he's up then, isn't it? You know, the next one, at least you'll probably see a goal. I mean, 1970 at Hampden Park, I mean, that was a 0-0 as well. I'm sure that there's been quite a few 0-0s over the years, but 1872 and 1970 were definitely 0-0s.
Yeah, no, it's great. You can. It's quite ironic, isn't it? The first ever international game, and it's 0-0. You know, it's 5,000 fans. They must have gone away from that game thinking, "Don't bother that football, Ark. It's boring." You know, but now look at it. Yeah,
let's go back to rugby.
150 years on. It caught on a little bit, didn't it?
Yeah, just slightly. Especially when we used to play those games up at Hampden Park, Scotland versus England.
Yeah.
A few more than 5,000, eh? They used to get 120 plus, 130 plus, didn't they, in Hampden Park in those glorious days?
Yeah, I've seen one of the. It's called Turnstiles. Lifted Over Turnstiles is the book title. I'm going a little bit off memory here.
A couple of volumes of that, isn't there?
Yeah, there's a few volumes, and I'm sure there's a picture in there. It's Celtic against someone, but I remember the attendance anyway. It was around 160,000.
Crazy.
Would you believe?
It's mad, isn't it? It's incredible.
Bonkers, isn't it? So that's some hot dogs they sold on that day.
Absolutely, and some nips of scotch and brandy, no doubt.
Yeah, absolutely. Queue for the toilets.
God, they didn't bother. If you went to the toilet in a crowd like that, you'd never get back. You just done it on the stands.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And they did.
Yeah.
The book that came out recently. Just mentioning some of the new releases and ones that's coming soon. One that, again, I mentioned pitch again, but it's called Power Players.
Okay.
By Ronnie Blaszek. I've probably got that completely wrong. I think I got Ronnie right. The subtitle, it's a football and propaganda, war and revolution. So there's a kind of synergy there, really, with obviously what's happening in Ukraine and Russia and what have you. But it's a fascinating look at the ugly side of the beautiful game. And it just talks about how football's been used as an instrument of political power. So you've got dictators in the Middle East who brutally bring players into line and present themselves as, fathers of the people, etc. But it's great stories, and it does talk about Yugoslavia, Ukraine, and the Arab world, and the ultras, and etc., and how it's all linked to politics. Because there's always one of my favourite ever books. It's a chunk of a book called The Age of Football by David Goldblatt, who wrote a very famous book called The Ball Is Round.
Yeah.
But those books really do show you the how linked to society and politics that football is now. It has been for many, many years. It's incredible, and you probably we don't realise it as how interlinked they are.
Well, we do, because we see the players down every week, don't we?
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we do. But this book, it's a really fascinating looking book, which picks on that. Yeah, football in propaganda, war and revolution. So it's quite neat in terms of the timing. Great looking cover as well. And that particular one from Pitch. Books that's coming in soon as well. If I just mention it, I won't mention it.
Just being quiet now. I've done all my work. I'm just, you're just going to tell me, and I'm going to go, oh, I like that.
Yeah.
Again, I love the way that you promote them. You've got your table and you got your cup of coffee and you got your book, and that it looks really artistic. And again, with you have that many books and you promote that many books, and that's what you do. You're a book promoter. You read as well. You've got the ability to read. You listen to me trying to read about Dixie Dean's book. I'm awful at reading, but I am getting through Dennis's book. But I do look through and I go, yep, like that, bang, like it, share it. And there are some books that really I go, ooh, ears prick up. So you carry on, mate, and I'll see if my ears prick up to any of them.
Well, I still think it's a mini task of mine, Paul. All these podcasts, we're on 9 now, aren't we?
Yeah.
By the time we get to double figures and further down, but you would have read a book by then, from cover to cover, Paul.
Janet and John was the last book I read cover to cover.
Brilliant. But one that you might take your fancy, because I mean this in the nicest way. It's a pictorial book. It comes out in October. It's called World Cup Moments. It's by The Time.
I like pictures.
And the author is Richard Whitehead. So the guy, so he's linked. I'm pretty sure I might have been assuming here it is the same Richard Whitehead. I would be amazed it's not the same.
I'll have a look at that.
But he's putting the words together, and it kind of link as well, because The Cup is one of my most favourite recent books. Obviously, he wrote that, and the imagery in the book is brilliant, but the stories are brilliant as well, aren't they, as well? But this is,
intelligent man, you know.
He is, yeah.
Very
I've listened to your podcast with him. What he knows about football is incredible, isn't it?
But he also, do you know what he does? He kind of, like you write a book and then you have a proofreader.
Yeah.
He's the next level above the proofreader. He's like an edit person.
Yeah.
So he'll look at it and he'll change it, all of that. He's proper clever.
Yeah. I hope he is the same Richard Whitehead.
Yeah. Villa have got some really, really clever supporters and authors.
Yeah. But that World Cup moment, so it's basically tying it with the World Cup was coming up, but it's the 100. What they've done is picked out 100 iconic images and articles.
Brilliant.
So it's all the best moments from the first World Cup in Uruguay, 1930. North Korea's fairy tale in England, 66, and right up to the modern times. So when Germany humiliated Brazil in 2014, which that iconic semi-final, was it 7-1,
wasn't it?
1, yeah. Mm-hmm. So, but that's coming out in October. So, and the forwards by Henry Winter. So,
okay.
It was, so that looks a great book. Yeah, The Times, that is. World Cup moments. I think I shared it recently.
I'll have a look at that and share it
on my post. Coming out is the Tommy Hutchinson story.
Oh yes,
Hutch.
Yep, I've seen that. Shared that. What a player he was. In fact, Uddy talks so highly of Tommy Hutchinson. He was out there. I think he was out there in. They won the league in '82, so it would have gone out after the cup final. Coventry versus Tottenham, where he scored a goal for both sides, didn't he, in the first game?
That's it.
Tommy Hutchinson. But Uddy says, what a player he was.
Yeah.
What a player. So, I'll get that book. That is an ear pricker up of mine. The great Tommy Hutchinson. I wouldn't mind making a podcast with Tommy.
Oh, it'd be fantastic, wouldn't it? Yeah, absolutely. So, the story of one small boy's near impossible dream becoming a reality. He grew up in the poverty, the 1950s, in the Fife coalfield. He just had as it says there, unshakable belief in himself, and had a great career, didn't he? Most notably at Coventry, as you said, during the 70s into the 1981. When he left to move on to, I think it was Manchester City.
Yeah, he did. I'm sure he did. He played Man City. Tottenham played for Manchester City in '81. Yeah. But in Dennis's book, Dennis said of Tommy, blimey, we bought a player here. And again, I can't remember who the contact was, but I'd got Alan his number, so Uddy must have it. So I'll phone up Alan and see if I can do a podcast with Tommy Hutchinson promoting his book. Who's published that book? Is it another Pitch?
It is. I'm pretty sure it is Pitch. Yeah. Let's have a look. Yeah, Pitch. Pitch again. Pitch.
Have a word with your friends at Pitch, because they probably won't come back to me. So have a word with your friends at Pitch and see if they fancy connecting me. I mean, I'll try with Alan, but if he's still got his number. But I would like to
do that. I'll note that down. I know that's going to be a really popular book, because when I do share anything like on Twitter or Facebook, that one, the alerts coming in through my phone, I was like, what's going on? And people retweeting it, liking it, etc. There's certain books out there that catch the imagination. So, that was definitely one. It was suddenly like, blimey, crikey, that's going to be a popular one. So, but yeah, I took a note of that. So I'll see what I can do.
Because let me just say before you say, you did line me up with both of those, the Alchemy book and the Game of the Year entry as well. We had a conversation. I said, by all means, and then it comes to fruition. So you're my agent.
I'll mention the fee later. So also coming out October, we've got there's a lot of World Cup theme, and that's why there's so many, of course, coming out in October ahead of November for the World Cup. I still feel strange to say that. You've got The Making of the FIFA World Cup by Jack Davies, and so this is 75 of the most memorable moments. Probably some similarities to that book I mentioned earlier by the Times, but probably more about the not so much pictorial, more like the written word, let's say. But that's one that's coming out, which I'm looking forward to. There is one about Qatar 2020, the tiny nation that dreamed big. So, let's have a look at that one. That's coming out by Pitch. The Back Page is coming out by Pitch as well. So, 50 years of headlining with Sporting Kings by Steve Miller.
Okay.
So The Back Page is a fascinating look at the world of sports journalism for the eyes of Steve Miller, who spent 50 years covering some of the greatest events in football, golf and tennis. So he reveals what it was like to get to know the legends like Bob Paisley, Brian Clough, and rub shoulders with some of the stars of the 90s as well, like Cantona, Ron Robson, Beckham, etc. So, that'd be an interesting book, which comes out on Monday. There's quite a few books you'll see on my feed coming out on Monday, the 3rd of October. So,
When a book is being released, I mean, you've got so much experience now. Is there a certain time that the books... I mean, I know books come out for Christmas, and you've alluded to the fact that there's a World Cup in November, and World Cup books are coming out now. But do books come out the beginning of the month, or the middle, or the end? Is there a time where you go, right, I know that book's going to come out, because they always come out at that time in the month?
It's a good question, and I'd have to think about off memory, but it's probably, I think a lot of it is probably around the start of the month, end of the month. I think people get paid around about that time, don't they? It's one of probably the reasons as well why they come out at that certain time. Certainly when you think of the World Cup, there was a lot of books that came out in July, June about particular clubs, knowing that the season's going to be kicking off soon. But it's things like that. You tend to get quite a lot of books just thinking it through. Certainly at the start of the month, at the end of the month. And it's probably because of that reason people are getting paid.
And again, days of the week, is it pretty much on a Monday?
Mondays and Thursdays. Yeah.
Oh, right, okay.
So, very strange. It's funny I've never really thought about it, to be honest, but Mondays probably makes sense, but Thursdays as well. So, Pitch Publishing always go for a Monday.
Right,
Pitch Publishing will always get a book come out on a Monday. So, I can't think of them never doing otherwise, but most of us will do, a Wednesday maybe, but a Thursday, just ahead of the weekend, etc. So, but I'm not really sure the reasons why that is, but we tend to go down that route.
You'll have to ask your mates at Pitch. You've got a load of questions to ask Pitch.
So other books that's coming out in October, there's a couple of books. There's one around Manchester United, which celebrates the history, called Glory, Glory, Man United. So it's from its talks about it from its genesis as Newton Heath, of course, when it was founded in 1878. And it's written by a lifelong Red Devils fan, Neville Moore. And it just talks about the extraordinary history of that club. And it's a bit like an anthology from what I can see, a concise history of Manchester United. So certainly one for United fans out there. There's one coming out, Football in the Land of the Soviets, by a guy called Carlos Vinas, who I know is a great, because he wrote a book on and the club you may have heard, St. Pauli in Germany.
Yeah, I've heard of them.
So
iconic
very
club, aren't they?
iconic. Yeah, left
Are they
wing.
from Hamburg?
It is, isn't it? Yeah. I think it's Hamburg, Aaron. Yeah. So, but he's the co-author of that book called St. Pauli and Other Footballs Possible. But this book is Football in the Land of the Soviets. So, and it's just offering a fresh perspective on a monumentous chapter in modern political history. So, how the Russian game was transformed in its first few decades. So, well, I'd like the link up to history. My favourite books was always around history and football, so that'll be a fascinating one.
The growth of Russian football come through Gazprom.
Then the summer of '63. This is about Revy's plan for Leeds United.
Right, that sounds good.
So written by Gary Edwards. He's written a lot of books. In fact, it says here, it's his 7th book, this is. So he's a columnist. He's
all Leeds.
For the League. Sorry?
All Leeds that he's written about.
Yeah. I think so. The ones that spring to mind are Leeds. He might have written others. But yeah, that's coming out. So basically, summer of '63 uncovers the truth behind the dirty Leeds tag that prevailed for almost 60 years. Gleaned from players' private photos, telegrams, scrapbooks, and the testimonies of Leeds and opposition fans. So it's an amazing account of Don Revy's vision to turn a failing side into the club's greatest ever team. So that comes out on Monday.
Oh, right, okay. That dirty Leeds tag, Johnny was telling me, they took the disciplinaries from, I think, the youth, the reserve, all of the Leeds club, and then put it out, and it wasn't a true reflection on the first team. So it was a distorted reflection, but Uddy says they were dirty. And everybody that played against them, Paul Fletcher, they were dirty. I mean, there's no two ways about it. Leeds could put it about a bit, but what never and what always is forgotten is that Leeds were a great football team as well. So there's always the tag dirty Leeds, but let's balance it by saying, in my opinion, Leeds United team is the greatest team I've seen from Britain.
Yeah, they're not the team, obviously, they're not my team, but I do, when I think of great English football clubs, Leeds United is always up there for me. It's
First
one of those clubs.
team, not a club. Yeah, not a club, because before Revie, Leeds had won nothing. I mean, Leeds, I was having this chat with TC on one of the podcasts. You could argue that the biggest team in Yorkshire, and certainly in terms of honours, is Sheffield Wednesday. Leeds United aren't a big club. I mean, they are because of what Revie done. And that when you look at what Revie done, and then when he went to England, you can understand why England wanted him to be the manager. But when he went and managed England, it just didn't happen for him for whatever reason. I don't know. I mean, not picking our best players was probably the major factor. And history repeating itself with Gareth Southgate, but there you go. Next.
Story, exactly. I think we're both on the same wavelength there. A book coming out, another one, How Britain Brought Football to the World. Be interested. There's a lot of books similar to this. I'd be interested to see how this differs, but it's How Britain Brought Football to the World by Stuart Laycock and Philip Laycock. So an amazing story of how Britain has brought football to the world, including the British naval officer who introduced it to Japan's Naval Academy, and the Cornish miners who took pasties and football to Mexico, the first club in Uruguay. So interesting. I'll certainly get it because, as I just mentioned, the history of football always fascinating. There's always a news story that you think you know it all, and then you find something else. So that'd be a good one. A couple of others coming out again. I mentioned this pitch. There's one, Her Game 2, a manifesto for change by Matt Riley. It's basically a call to arms for women to have given equal access to profile opportunities and advanced advancement to the beautiful game. And we talked about earlier, didn't we, about how women's football's come on, leaps and bounds, hasn't it? Certainly, obviously, on the back of the European Championships in the summer. So I know my daughter's 9 next month, how much she loves watching football, and she comes with me to the football as well. It's popular, isn't it? And but yeah, this is Matt Ride's book that's coming out towards the back end of October. So just one to look out for. And a couple more I would just mention. There's one that's been delayed for a while, but it's called The Season in Hell. Comes out towards the back end of October through Pen and Sword Books, and it's about the British footballers who were killed in the Second World War. And again, got a sad story, but again, just linking it to some of the footballers that never came back, basically, on those sorry times. And I think I'll wrap up on that, because there is 40, like I said, there's a lot of books coming out that I'll be sharing over the next days and weeks in October.
When will you be sharing that Leeds United book? Because that sounds tasty. I'm looking forward to that. Was that another Pitch Publishing?
The Leeds, yes, the Summer of '63. Yeah, that comes out on Monday. Yeah, I'll be sharing that.
Because what a team they were when they got promoted to the First Division in 1962-63 season. Yeah. They got to the FA Cup final when was it? No, 60. No, it wasn't then. That was Leicester versus Manchester United, 63. So Reeve had assembled it. They got promoted 64, 65. 64-65, they got promoted because they got to the FA Cup final in 65 against Liverpool, and St John scored the winning goal in extra time, and they got picked at the post, I think, by Manchester United, and they drew in a game at St Andrews 3-3. They were 3-0 down at half-time, Leeds, and got it back to 3-3. Of course, there was only 2 points for a win in those days, but fine margins, and Leeds come within a whisker of getting promoted, and in the first season winning the double. That would have been some achievement. So that book is about the birth of Don Reeve. Bobby Collins will be in that book. He was very instrumental in the birth, because he left Everton and went to play for Second Division Leeds United. So I'll be looking for, again, not a Leeds fan, but with clubs like that from that period, I'm very interested in getting them books.
And he's a great author, that Gary Edwards, as well. I do recall reading a book about, it was called Not Glossing Over or No Glossing Over It. It was how football cheated Leeds United. And if you remember, it was linking it back to the when they missed out on the European Cup 1975.
Yeah, they cheated.
So was it Bayern Munich?
Yeah, Bayern Munich. Yeah.
So, but yeah, he wrote a book about that, I remember.
And in 1973, Sniffer Clark told me the referee arrived on the same plane as the AC Milan team. You know what I mean? They were cheated out in 73 and 75. Again, and that's why Leeds fans sing like champions of Europe, don't they? Because in their opinion, they were the champions of Europe. They were cheated out of that. I mean, in fact, Leeds were cheated out of a lot of games, I mean, I know people go on and say about Leeds United, but when things happen like that, you almost have, as Big Ron would say to me, a siege mentality. And I think Leeds developed that by things that had happened to Leeds. So, that'll be a great book. I'm looking forward to that. I should buy that book.
Yeah, excellent. I'll have a word with Pitch as well on your behalf.
Yeah, thank you. I'll be interested in doing a podcast with that. I'll have a look at that and start following him and see if I get any response from the author.
Yeah, excellent.
Anything else, mate, or is that the end of our podcast?
That's it. That's the list from me. There's lots of others coming out, but we can pick up next time out. So the one thing I did just put a reminder on myself was just to say, if for fans out there as well, I don't think we've spoken since. I did share on the website to correspond with 2 years since launching it. I did a feature of the 20 favourite football books, which I shared as well. So that's on the website. You can look on there about some books through the years, which have been my favourites across football and the years, etc. So,
and have you read all them books, all them 20?
Yeah. The 20 I picked out. Yeah, I've read them. So yeah,
I have my favourite books, but I ain't read them. They're just my favourite books. I like the cover and the pictures.
Yeah, I don't read as much as I used to, if I'm honest. So, but that's a different matter.
How many you do in a month now? How many books you read in a month?
Well, moving house at the moment, not a lot. I've only read one in the last month, to be honest. Yeah. So I've got a long list to catch up on.
I've read chapters of quite a few books because I do, like with Johnny Giles, I got John's autobiography, started reading it, didn't have time to finish it before I'd done the interview. Then I've done it with John Giles, I put that aside, and then I move on and doing another podcast with another player. So again, read half the book. I've read so many half the books, but not many full books, apart from, as I say, Janet and John back in the day.
I must admit, there is books I can quickly read through. I can think of a couple of books where fairly recently maybe I've had a quick I won't read every single word. I'm quite a fairly quick reader, and I don't know. To be honest, if it's a book that's not quite if it's not quite grabbing my attention, I'll never disservice books because I'm not an author. I think every author's done something I've never done and probably never will do. But there's some books where you can, first few pages in, it's not going to grab me for the whole way through. I've got to kind of skim through it, if I'm honest.
See, what I do when I read a book, I'm usually reading a book because I'm going to be doing a podcast. I'll read the book and then I go, especially if it's something that I don't know and I'm learning. Now, I didn't realise I played in that game there. And I go on YouTube, have a look at it, read about it. So it takes me so long to read it because I'm actually researching while I'm reading the book as well. So
that's a very good point. The introduction of YouTube and what have you, that definitely slows down me. I'll read a book.
Yeah.
In fact, when I was thinking of reading that League One Leeds book, I found myself just thinking, I couldn't even see that game, that goal, etc. And I found myself looking on YouTube. Yeah. And before I know it, I've just gone into a world of looking at YouTube videos.
Yeah, because you go from one to the other, don't you? That follows on, that follows on, that follows on. You're looking at that, and it's just like a spider's web or an A to Z, and you're just going up all these different roads and different,
Yeah. And before you know it, it's time for bed.
Absolutely. Yeah, a bit like Zebedee, wasn't it? Boing, time for bed. Ta-ra, see you. On that note, it is a good night from me. Thank you so much for your time, Andy. Always a joy and a pleasure. And thank you to Colin Abbott for being our author of the month this month. We will probably do it within 4 weeks, part 10, and then part 11 after another 4 weeks. But it has been a bit mad with summer holidays and, then moving house, etc., and what have you. So till next time, thank you. And you always say, what's your catchphrase when you say
happy reading?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Happy reading, everyone.
As dawn broke over the seven seas, the pirates of the Crimson Galleon set sail for adventure. But there was one problem: paperwork. Mountains of it. Filing, invoices, you name it.
This work ain't fit for a pirate.
Luckily, their captain had an idea. She used the smart buying tools on Amazon Business so they could work more efficiently and get back to doing what they do best. I know, right? Amazon Business, your partner for smart business buying.